just one thing, one comment. We did bring over the regulations into the Grand Landings MPD about airport operations, so just wanted to clarify that for the record.
Okay, and Mr. Mingle, this presentation that we have in our binders is not this complete presentation you did. So could you get those over to us that has the specific 333 and all that stuff in it? Could you
Yes, sir.
make sure we get a copy of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, with that being said, we're going to open this up for public comment. So if you have public comments relating to this agenda item, please come forward.
Good afternoon, Darlene Shelley, K-Section, Palm Coast. I really have a lot of issues to go over, and 3 minutes is not going to scratch the surface. I would really like to have the opportunity to give a presentation on all the different legal measures that you could pursue to help protect the residents of Palm Coast and Flagler County. The template that the county used, and Mr. Mingle had taken parts of that. It was originally 125 pages, and they cherry-picked what fit their agenda and prepared that and some other verbiage in their presentation to you today. But so many pertinent parts of that FDOT Airport Land Use Compatibility Guidebook were left out completely. And also, I just want to mention that there's a lot of rhetoric out there that the county's hands are tied and that FAA controls the airport, but that's completely untrue. According to that 125-page FDOT document, the FAA provides advisory guidance. Florida state law legally mandates implementation, and local regulations customize zoning to each airport's specific needs. Together, these components work to promote safe and efficient airport protections. It goes on, while Chapter 333, Florida statute, sets a baseline for airport zoning regulations, local planners have the power to enact additional regulations to protect public health, safety, and welfare of their local communities. Section 33303 notes, this section does not prohibit an airport authority, a political subdivision, or its administrative agency, or any other governing body operating a public use airport from establishing airport zoning regulations more restricted than prescribed in this section in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public in the air and on the ground. Therefore, if local governments determine that additional restrictions are necessary for their local circumstances beyond those explicitly included in Chapter 333 or in federal guidance, they may add them. And I encourage you to do so, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. Yes, Ms. Weiss.
Gina Weiss, Quail Hollow. The ordinance is the speculation based on airport growth, which the master plan requires aviation easements that they do not have. This ordinance is a land use zoning issue, and it's implementing plans after a lot of building has been done. Where is the public's disclosure when people purchase their homes? How many homes reside in the area of influence of Mr. Mengel's copied and pasted generic modeling over properties map? We are not here to debate. We want to know what homes are in the area of influence. We want to know which homes are going to be considered nonconformities. Also, is there going to be takings? Are there going to be nonconformities? If so, our only method would be to go to court, and we only have 90 days. So this revised by the AFA overlay ordinance got very complicated very quickly. Our homes will plummet in value because of the wording of some of the clauses in this ordinance. We need to know from the county assessor's office, we need a specific map that they must create a filter to show what homes are listed on their deed as having an assessment on the property to be in the area of influence via special abrogation easement. They need to create a checkbox of how many homes are located in the area of influence that would require the county to do a property exchange or buy out property rights or create an easement on the owner's property with the owner's permission. We need to find out who is impacted. Nonconformity can be height and location, meaning a specific zone. Also, according to Florida statute, the county cannot make retroactive property claims against our deeds. But is this the county trying to do this within the ordinance? Now, some of this ordinance should be created to create maps. It's a good idea in areas where they must purchase abrogation easements. No one is debating that. Pay attention to the wording on the ordinance, nonconformities, which means in the event of a catastrophe, a homeowner cannot rebuild. Number 68 of the ordinance reads, removal, alteration, mitigation, or marking and lighting of existing airport habits are number 69 public purposes for which political subdivisions may raise and expend public funds, and number 70, acquire land or property interest therein or air rights thereover. This is a taking. We also have Mr. Mengel's bullet presentation where, as he calls it by the numbers, 16,100 in total parcels are within the zones. So where is the disclosure notice about this to the homeowners? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weiss. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Faith Walker. I'm from the Z section. So I'm one of those homeowners that actually had my home built in 22, bought my home in 22, and was told that there was a small executive airport. Before I came to the last meeting, council meeting, and I think I mentioned this then, I had an airport or a flight lesson airplane flying circles around our neighborhood over my house. At the same time, another one just a little bit higher looked like it was flying that way straight, and then a helicopter doing lessons 2 streets over, flying around. There is an accident waiting to happen anytime, I can tell you that. Our neighborhood all talks about it. The Z section is very sick of this. We wake up every morning at 7 a.m. by the sounds of airplanes. One of the things that I want to point out is who polices all of this? Who has oversight? Because the existing oversight so far, the FAA says that flights should not be in populated areas 1,000 feet or less, or in unpopulated areas or less populated areas 500 feet or less. These guys are flying 200 feet and sometimes less over my house constantly. Constantly. Nobody does anything about this. Nobody is policing anything. However, in this ordinance, I happen to see that if there are restrictions and my house happens to get, and I'll just say, how about the whole Z section getting hit by the storm and wiped out? We're all coming to Palm Coast because you guys owe us money for our property now, right? Because we're not going to be able to possibly rebuild when it comes time. And if that is the case, Palm Coast goes bankrupt immediately when everybody starts suing Palm Coast for their property cost. Because my insurance is going to pay for my house and my belongings, but it's not going to pay for that lot somewhere else. That is Palm Coast. The Fifth Amendment guarantees that, by the way, and I think you guys already all know that. The only other thing that I kind of want to point out is that there are administrative costs to a lot of these things that I'm seeing. So I'm seeing notifications going out to people. One, are they going out to the existing homeowners? Again, nobody seems to be caring about the existing homeowners. I would not have bought in that neighborhood. I was told there was an small executive airport. I wasn't told there was 400 planes. I'll just say average 400, it sounds like, a day, including holidays. Flying very low over the house all the time. You can't sit outside. You have company over. You have to pause what you're talking about because you can't hear them. I'll go back to the administrative cost real quick just to mention this. If there are notifications that go out and there's coordination that has to happen to contact all the homeowners and that, I just want to know who pays for all of this. Who paid for the air conditioners to be moved when they had to be moved? Who pays for all of this administrative exercises that now has to take place or may have to in the future. That should be in a plan document. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Chantal Prelinger. All right, I live in a section Z, and before we moved there, we had no idea about the airport. Nobody told us. The noise per se does not bother me so much unless I'm on the phone outside, unless it's a jet. So if it's a jet, it doesn't matter where I am in my house. I'll run out to see what it is because it's so loud. From the presentation, I understood the noise average was only when the planes are taking off or landing. I was not sure if it made any sense to me that they measure the noise when they take off and flying and not that when they fly over our neighborhood, over our house. So the zone is restricted very closely around the airport because obviously that's where they take off and land. But we live next to it, and we don't hear when they take off or land. We hear when they just zoom around and the flight school. So my question to you is, what can you all do to stop the flight school and a special presentation with the old airplanes? That would be already a big reduction of traffic in our neighborhood. Now, something else I want to understand is the landowner is the county, but is the airport itself private, or does it belong to the county?
It's a county airport, ma'am. It's a county airport.
So it all belongs to the county. Okay, well, that's good, because the county works for us, we don't work for them. So if that accommodates the people living in the area, I suppose the county should look into it. And we're not the people who need to adapt to what they're doing. And there was a question about a radar. That's an interesting question because how safe is the radar by itself, even if you add one? Would that affect radiation for the people living around? And another thing I mentioned, the noise study was 2008 or 2009, and we're watching 2025. Can we have something more recent? And if we have an accident, will our private insurance cover that? Or will they deny because they will say, you knew there was an airport around? So how do we handle that? It's not, I mean, for us, most of the conflict is, can a plane fall off the sky and land on your house? You know, I was just recently in Europe, and I kept on hearing those stories about planes falling off the sky, to the point I say, is it even safe to fly back? But here I live next to the airport with those little cuckoo birds. And the flight school where those people are learning, so they can make a mistake, you know, is concerning to us as we live nearby. Just wanted to mention and appreciate anything you're willing to do to defend the community. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else for public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Hello. My name's Laura Romsberg, and 2 years ago, I moved here from Pittsburgh with my husband, and this was like our dream place to be. And now all these regulations coming in, zoning regulations for the airport, it's really made a it's going to make a very big effect on our property values. From what I could tell from the map, we're a little bit outside of it, but there's a lot of people who are inside of it. And I kind of feel like we're we're getting our property taken away from us. It's being highly regulated, and we're going to have a hard time selling when we do want to sell. There's a lot of complaints about the touch-and-go runs. And I did a little bit of research, and Vero Beach Airport is also a county-run airport. They tried to make it voluntary on hours that touch-and-go runs could be made, and it's against the FAA regulations. They have an agreement with the FAA, and because of this agreement, it's a grant, they have to allow that. But this is going to be a master plan that's going to be put in place, and I think it's really important to get these regulations tuned up so that it can limit these touch-and-go runs. Let's see here, I'm sorry. Oh, wait a minute here. But there is a way to get the touch-and-go runs limited if it goes into the master plan. I'm kind of confused as why commercial properties aren't included in these zoning regulations. Why is it any different? So,
It's just public comment, ma'am. We'll answer the questions after if we can.
all right. So I'm really glad to see up there on March 3rd that there's going to be an airport zoning commission appointed. And I'm sure any of you are probably able to be appointed on that commission? Yes, no? Or is it all strictly for commissioners? But if you are able to be appointed, I really hope that you can have our backs here and get involved with that so that these regulations can protect us too as homeowners and property owners.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Angela Storno, and I live just outside the zoning that they're trying to get approved. I just found out about this the other day, and I wish the public knew about it ahead of time, why it's taken so many years to get this approval for this overlay. The three of you answered a lot of the, had questions that I had to ask, and I'm grateful that you're here concerning the town center, concerning the people, the safety, and the noise. And once this master plan comes in, what's going to happen to the rest of us that are just outside the zone? What's going to happen to our town? I really hope you guys do a good job on this and really look into this agreement and maybe possibly not agreeing to it. I don't know whether you can or not and what the FAA and that has to do with it. Like, I'm really unprepared. This is all new to me. So kind of depending on you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else for public comment? No, ma'am. Seeing no one come forward, we'll come back to the dais. Can you put back up that last slide again, Mr.
Yes, sir. I
Engel?
was going to go back to the
I wanted to ask this
original
quick-
graphic, but go
I
ahead.
just want to ask this quick question, right there. So you're going to form an airport zoning commission, and you have it in parentheses or whatever, or the Flagler County Plan and Development Board. Are those the people that are going to be that board as far as the zoning commission is concerned? I'm asking that because how many people in there have aviation experience and know what they're doing? Do we have the right people in place to go through and write this ordinance?
Well, the Airport Zoning Commission is tasked with reviewing the zones that have been established that are shown there, the horizontal, the conical, review the zones, and then also to review the uses, is how the statute refers to it, Chapter 333. And so I respond that I don't know if you have to have an exact knowledge of, I don't think you have to be a pilot to be able to serve on the Airport Zoning Commission. And be very clear, the Airport Zoning Commission is only seated to review the airport zoning regulations in their establishment and any amendments to the airport zoning regulations. It won't be a standing commission of either the county or any other body.
Well, the question is their level of expertise to be doing.
Understood.
To be doing this specific task.
I think my response would be that they are a land use body that routinely reviews land use requests within unincorporated area of Flagler County, provides a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and that's why we propose them in this role as the Airport Zoning Commission.
Does the county have an aviation attorney on council, on retainer?
No, sir, not to my knowledge.
You don't think that they should in this matter?
I don't believe so, and I guess I could answer the model ordinance that's here, the one commenter that said we didn't adopt the 125-page model. It isn't a 125-page model. It's 7 pages. It's pages 70 through 77. That's our starting point, at least with this, and so that at least my approach with it is that if you apply and adopt in some substantial form FDOT's model, then you're meeting the requirements, minimum requirements of Chapter 333 to satisfy the airport zoning requirements.
Anyone else from the dais? Anything?
I have a couple questions.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
With the current ordinance, will it create any non-conforming lots?
It will not.
If the airport expands, the expected expansion, will there be non-conforming lots?
If an airport expansion occurs, it could. And so that instance would be in 2 instances. If either the runway protection zone, the yellow zones that I showed you previously, if those expand outward of the airport boundaries, the airport property itself, or if the noise contour, the 65 DNL, extends outside of the airport boundaries. Those are the 2 instances. If either of those expand outside those boundaries, yes, ma'am, there will be then a discussion, or at least a review then, of potential non-conforming uses lying within either of those 2 that would constitute the uses that then would be, as Mr. Seeger had mentioned, possible acquisition of those parcels. That then comes into play only then.
Okay, so that is where we need to make sure legal protects us, whether it's through the interlocal agreement, however it is. I don't want to be a part of any signing off on that, I'll tell you. So I don't know how our residents get protected. I don't know how the city gets protected, but we need to make sure that to whatever extent we have control over that process, let's try to do what we can. We're not the county. The county has the ability to enter the ordinance. I can only urge to prevent any expansion that could result in that. Can't force them to not expand, but that would be my plea to them. My other question, this might be more for Mr. Seeger. The elevation requirements for the 1,000 feet versus 500 feet, congested versus, I guess, more congested. For takeoff and landing, I guess, how do we figure out where that exception lies for takeoff and landing? Because I understand that there's a difference between obviously a plane just flying versus ascent and descent. What does that look like for a touch and go? And to the resident's point, who's regulating, making sure those planes are complying with those elevation levels?
Okay, so earlier when the resident was up, they said something about these airplanes are landing, they're below 1,000 feet and flying over homes, right? So that is because the first part that they had to read, it said, except when landing and taking off, is when you can be below the 1,000 feet
Right.
over residential. So if anybody is flying not in the air traffic pattern, then in flying over residential, they have to be 1,000 feet or above. So when that would be the pilot in command, that when he or she's in a traffic pattern, when they're coming in, and typically when they're downwind and turning base, so they're going to start to descend. So typically they should be, when they're downwind, they should be around 800 to 1,000 feet, and then make the turn and then start descending to land to make their final approach. And that's when they're coming, that's when they're descending from 1,000 feet and then down to probably, could be 300 or 400 feet coming over the neighborhood, and then ultimately touching down at the airport.
Okay, so are there certain required flight patterns that have to take place based on any of the, I don't know, the paths or anything like that to minimize how low they're flying over homes?
Well, so first of all, I mean, I sometimes, I see.
Sorry, to be clear, during ascent and descent,
I'm sorry?
during that ascent and descent.
Right. Well, so, I mean, again, that's up to the pilot, right? You know, now here's what we have at our airport. We have what they call a PAPI, Precision Approach Path Indicator lights. So when they use those lights, they keeps them at a minimum safe altitude to land correctly. And that's a 3% glide slope, and that's what they want to be on.
3% glide slope,
3% glide slope. That's what the PAPIs do.
but it's not required.
Well, you want to fly those lights, because if you don't, basically, they change, red over red, you're dead. That means you're too low. So you want to keep the lights all one color. If you go too high, then you're too high. Then you're just going to land further down the runway.
Okay, so have we done a calculation as to what that looks like? If a plane is on a 3% flight glide, how high they should be over certain homes?
No.
No?
No, we haven't done that. We don't do that.
Vice Mayor, I could probably answer that if you don't mind, that does correspond, 3% does correspond to the approach zone that we had shown. And so that is equivalent of 34 to 1 on your slope. And that if my math holds right, then I'm figuring at 10,000 feet out from that primary runway, you're at 294 feet above, and then 327 feet above sea level, but 294 feet is what my math is correct, at 10,000 feet out from that runway.
Okay, so that would be an appropriate approach.
Yes, ma'am.
So if a home is within that area, they're going to have a plane over them at 300 feet.
Correct.
That's the bottom of the approach zone.
corridor.
Yeah, which is the lowest they'd be, so that's the most, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I know this, they're not always going by regulations and what they're supposed to be doing, because my old house was in the B section across from Indian Trails Sports Complex, and I had planes all the time coming over my house, less than 1,000 feet. I used to jump 1,000 feet. That was standard. We usually jumped 800 feet. I'd have planes coming over my house less than 1,000 feet, and they're doing engine shut-off and restarts. That's been going on for years. So I don't know who's in charge of regulating that, but it's not good for our community when someone's doing a stall out over residential areas for our city. You know, I know they have to have the training, but it shouldn't be done over populated areas. This final hearing, this April 21st final hearing is, when will our city be required to enter into an interlocal agreement?
It'll be at some date following that adoption. Assuming the adoption happens on April 21st, we will come back to you with the interlocal, with the text of the adopted ordinance, and certainly look to you then to adopt the interlocal.
Okay.
Why is it that we don't have an oversight committee anymore? The airport, there used to be an airport oversight committee.
I know it was sunsetted. I don't know if Mr. Seeger can talk more directly about that. I don't know the exact reasons for it, but I know it was sunsetted.
Okay, I don't want to hold you up. This is probably more pertinent to the next presentation, but might be something to reconsider and maybe request from the county, being that apparently there's not much regulation otherwise that can be done.
We know the rumors and stuff, what happened, so.
Mayor, City Council, if you're ready for Mr. Blocker's presentation, Jason's going to come up and get it started for
Go ahead
him.
and cue it up,
Can I ask
Jason.
one more question?
Yes.
Is there any way we can, through, I forget the name of the software for maps that we use, but can we look at what the extent of that possible runway expansion would look like with those zones, so that we know what it looks like to the possible extent, right?
I'll talk with Mr. Seeger, and yes, sir, I think that's easy to
If we get an
provide.
analysis of that, so we know what barring a reconfiguration of those runways completely,
Yes, sir.
which would then require another master plan, right? I think that would tell us what the largest version of this looks like.
Understood. A great suggestion. I think we can come up with that. I wanted to mention two more things. I think along that same line, Vice Mayor, your comment about the Airport Master Plan 333.06 Subpart 4 in Florida statutes, 333.06 Subpart 4, talks about the process we go through for adoption of the master plan, and it does have us notifying the affected local government, including City of Palm Coast, when we're coming in to adopt that, and it's very specific. It's not just the master plan, it's several other site selection study, amendment to an airport master plan, environmental assessment. We would be required to notify the city. And then the other part I wanted to mention was that we are working right now on a tool, maybe be placed on the property appraiser's map, maybe on our own site, where somebody could put in an address or do a map search where they could do a point and be able to then have an idea of what those zones are above them as far as a height restriction. And so we're working on that also. I think our intent is to have that ready prior to adoption so that we can generate some more comments, certainly about what this would have as an effect. But for the most part, my closing would be 150 and greater is what I think is your takeaway with this, is the concern that is going to be implemented through the zoning regulations. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mingle. Jeremiah, well, he's going to cue it up for you.
Thank you, Adam.
As Jason provides this, I'll just kind of update the council. This is something Mr. Duffy prepared to kind of go over the federal law, kind of give you all an overview, and we'll go over that in more detail. Certainly understand the concerns of the residents, but I want to highlight kind of some of the more specific nuances of the law, then we can talk about it and go from there, because y'all are, in a tough spot here. So this specific airport is a general aviation airport that we have here in Flagler. So under U.S. statute, federal statute, a public use airport that does not have scheduled services or has scheduled services with less than 2,500 passengers boarding each year. So this particular airport does not have a scheduled carrier service or commercial service. It's a general aviation airport. As you know, it's operated by the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners. So in this matter, y'all's jurisdiction is limited to the control of the county commission. So next slide, please. So the United States government has exclusive sovereignty over airspace in the United States. There was a statute that was mentioned earlier. It's Florida Statute 333. So that corresponds with this as far as protecting the airspace in times of national defense. This came up more recently during 9/11 when there was an immediate need to address kind of the immediate airspace. That gives the federal government the authority to shut down all airspace, as well as the state government to do that in a supporting effort. So the verbiage from that is Congress delegated authority to the FAA, the ability to define navigable airspace and the authority to regulate navigable airspace of aircraft by regulation order under 49 U.S.C. 40103 subsection B subsection 1. So again, that's just kind of the black letter law that what we're getting at here is that the federal government has preemption over any state or local ordinance when it comes to our aviation space.
But what is considered aviation space? Isn't it 500 or above?
It can be, yes, ma'am. And the FAA can adjust that as need be. So you'll have some airports that have different. I'm not going to use the right verbiage. I'm sure the colleagues from the county can correct me. Every airport facility has a different footprint. So as an example, we saw recently in D.C., you saw the tragedy where you saw a military asset aviation collide with a civilian. So they can adjust that based on the needs of the specific air facility, and they can increase or decrease based on that generally. But the federal government actually has oversight over that. So if there's a local airport or a local general purpose aviation airport that wants to make adjustments to that, they have to be validated by the FAA, has to come down and do a study and again, the appropriate, I'm sure the county can address the appropriate aviation nomenclature for that, but there is a process for them to kind of evaluate that. Does that make sense?
Somewhat, but I guess my end game is if the aviation space is 500 feet or above, that's what they regulate, why can't we regulate 499 feet and below?
So I don't know the answer to that. My understanding is the FAA still has to have, so even if we adjust it at all, my understanding of the law is the FAA still has to have some oversight over that. That's my understanding.
Okay.
So again, so the history behind this, and y'all please jump in with questions, since this is a workshop, includes the use of airspace. So this statute and this body of law covers the use of airspace, the management and efficiency of the airspace, the air traffic control system, which generally is separate from the actual running of the airport and operations. You have the safety component, the navigational facilities, and aircraft noise, which is the most frequent that you run into in the cases that involve this. So next slide, please. So under 49 USC, and I'll read from it, enacted as the Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990, prohibiting local limitations on Stage 3 aircraft operations in the absence of approval by the Secretary of Transportation and all aircraft operators at the relevant airport. So this Airport Noise and Capacity Act of 1990, if you look at the history of that act, that was essentially Congress's reaction to, you had a lot of local general purpose or general aviation airports in communities, and there was a lot of issues with noise. So this was kind of Congress stepping in saying, hey, this is kind of the overall controlling act for that. And this was to really kind of take this away from local control, state control, kind of keep it in the federal capacity. So next slide, please. So there have been a couple of cases that have highlighted this. Some are older cases from World War II. The more recent is Arizona versus the United States. So here, Congress, and again, there's a lot of body to these cases, but I'm going to highlight a couple of key components here. Where Congress occupies the entire field, as it has in the field of alien registration, even complementary state regulation is impermissible. So again, talking about this kind of overriding preemption issue here. So Northwest Airlines versus the state of Minnesota, this is an older case from 1944, but Congress has recognized the national responsibility for regulating air commerce. Federal control is intensive and exclusive. Planes do not wander about the skies like vagrant clouds. They move only by federal permission, subject to federal inspection in the hands of federally certified personnel under intricate system of federal commands. It goes on to state its privileges, rights, and protections so far as transit is concerned. It owes to the federal government alone and not to any state government. In this case in particular, the issue here was the state of Minnesota was trying to assert kind of a state law claim that they wanted more oversight over the aviation space. Now this was a time, I can bring this back up.
It fell asleep on you.
Mr. De Lorenzo, I'm counting on you to keep this.
I got the trackpad finger for work, put that on there.
Okay. Well. No, that's all right, sir. All right, my screen's coming back up. So in this particular case, the state of Minnesota, there was an issue, and I won't bore everyone with the details. So there was really an issue over a state claim of they had more authority over the airspace. This obviously was a time of national conflict. We were at war at the time, so the federal government asserted, as they have in other examples, like, hey, we absolutely have the authority to make the decisions about the aviation space. So I highlighted this, and Mr. Duffy kind of consulted with an aviation, because they're board-certified attorneys in aviation law, so he consulted with one of the experts that works with some of the regional airports to kind of confirm this and make sure that we were bringing to y'all the appropriate case law, because this is a very important issue. It's a pressing issue for our residents and for y'all. We want to make sure that we're putting you all in the best position. So this case is still good case law. This, even though it's an older case, it's never been overturned by the Supreme Court. Challenges at the state level have really been measured under this case, which has created a strict preeminence.
Jeremiah, can I stop you for a second? Because this specifically says regulating air commerce. In accordance with the Commerce Clause, obviously Congress has a right to regulate. So my question is, do we delineate between the two? So in other words, a non-commerce plane, i.e. a plane that's training and not transporting or operating in commerce, does case law see a difference between those two things?
So I think that's a great point. So I spoke with an aviation attorney about that as well, because again, you have some board-certified attorneys that's what they do, is represent, some of the larger airports. This case has been interpreted to apply to general aviation airports as well. So even though there is not currently a carrier that's providing commercial trip, but anything can be, the way the FAA interprets, and they have the administrative rulemaking authority. The way the FAA interprets it and the way this case has been applied, that would include if we were renting hangar space and we, any of us individually, and we did anything, put any type of commercial activity in there, whether it was renting or doing, aircraft management or maintenance, any of that could still be interpreted as commercial activity.
They didn't go broad with that at all.
Absolutely. Well, and this creates some challenges. It creates some challenges for local government. It creates challenges for state government. Because there is a real need to manage some of the nuisance issues that come up that y'all are experiencing right now. So I want to recognize that, some of the challenges. Next slide, please. Here's some additional cases. Again, this is not to just throw case law at y'all, it's to kind of give you some of the cases that really are referenced the most is kind of in regards to this issue. Because unfortunately, this is a common issue. It's a common issue to have a general aviation airport and to have, kind of the noise issue and some of the potential safety issues that have been brought up. Gustavson versus the City of Los Angeles, this was one in 1996. Air traffic must be regulated at the national level without uniform equipment, specifications, takeoff and landing rules, and safety standards. It would be impossible to operate a national air transportation system. So this one in particular, the City of Los Angeles actually was trying to, if I find the history correctly, was actually trying to pass an ordinance to restrict the timing of the landing of commercial flights as well as private flights.
Can I jump in here real quick?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
So during the break, I asked a question about, the concern that you raised, Vice Mayor, about the air tower and the manning and it not being manned 24 hours. And so that is also regulated by the FAA because those air traffic controllers are paid, those contractors are paid by the FAA. And right now, we don't have the throughput to be able to get 24-hour coverage on the tower. And so I think, the traffic is regulated, through instances like this.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So in that particular case, there was a dispute about how it was going to be regulated. There was kind of this suit that came from that. Then we have the City of Burbank versus Lockheed Air Terminal. This is one from 1973. The Federal Aviation Administration, now in conjunction with the Environmental Protection Agency, has full control over aircraft noise, preempting state and local control. So in this particular case, again, it's tied in with the Environmental Protection Agency. It referenced that the Federal Aviation Administration has been empowered by Congress to make essentially the rulemaking regulations, and this kind of, is in this particular case, the Environmental Protection Agency, there was an issue, I believe I don't recall if it was a turtle, there was some type of issue with an endangered species, and the air traffic noise was maybe creating an issue for that particular endangered species. So in this particular case, there were some claims that were made, and the court in this case again found that the federal government ultimately has, in conjunction with another federal agency, the Environmental Protection, they actually have the final say in making those determinations. The example I would use, this is a separate issue, but it's similar to the Army Corps. Ultimately, the Army Corps of Engineers, when it comes to permitting, can ultimately make a final decision on whether permits are pulled or not. Even though the state agency and the state Environmental Protection Agency may have its own rules, unfortunately, we've all at a certain point experienced this in government, the Army Corps of Engineers ultimately can come in and say, hey, we're claiming authority to make the decision on this. Actually, we have an issue right now in front of the city where we're waiting on the Army Corps of Engineers to tell us whether they're going to take control or not, whether they're going to assert their authority or not. So we have to wait for them for 90 days to let us know what their decision is. So those are kind of, unfortunately, some of the difficulties when you're working at a local level with federal oversight.
So then, in Mr. Mangel's presentation, he had the 65 decibel day-night average sound level. Do we know, is that limitation set by the FAA? It is. Okay, I see him nodding in the back. Okay.
So here's some of the FAA requirements. So under 14 CFR, minimal safety altitudes, except when necessary for takeoff or landing, no person may operate an aircraft below the following altitudes. So this is in their rules. That's the hard deck. Correct, yes, sir. So over congested areas, over any congested area of a city or town or settlement, or over any open air assembly of persons, an altitude of 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a horizontal radius of 2,000 feet of the aircraft. Over other than congested areas, an altitude of 500 feet above the surface, except over open water or sparsely populated areas. In those cases, the aircraft may not be operated closer than 500 feet to any person, vessel, vehicle, or structure. Now, as you all note, it's using some language here that is not defined in the specific. So as an example, it uses the sparsely populated areas. Well, the definition of sparsely populated areas can vary, but the FAA does not in this particular section define what sparsely populated is. So there is some minor leeway in here, but this is kind of the threshold guidance that any rule involving aviation and kind of the approaches have to take.
Who regulates this?
Who regulates the FAA?
No, who enforces this rule that they have to be flying a certain level or a certain elevation above these areas?
So unless they're friends from the county, correct me, my understanding is the FAA during they do annual or actually biannual, sometimes monthly, depending on the status of the airport. They do compliance reviews, and they will look into, if there's an issue with people not complying with this or pilots not complying with it, the FAA would enforce it. So they're the enforcement agency.
So in a situation where you don't have radar,
I mean, how is it possible?
there's no way to review or enforce that, right?
So, well, right, I think we're dealing with two different things. There's the practical, the legal authority of who can enforce it, then there's the practical application of that, right? So the practical application is the FAA probably is not able to enforce this in every case.
But they reserve the authority to enforce it, but they don't necessarily enforce it.
Not only do they reserve it, they're actually the only enforcement agency that can enforce it. So but again, there's the legal operative, hey, they have the authority and they should be. Does it always happen that way? I think by y'all's personal experience, I think the mayor just shared an example that would illustrate that that's maybe not always strictly enforced.
Yeah, well, it like you stated, it's all in the definitions. What's considered a congested area? Is Palm Coast considered a congested area, or are we other than congested area? Say, we are a different category in New York, say New York City or Boston or Chicago? What is the definition? We need to know that, for one.
Yeah, even with the definition, though, if there's nobody out there to
Nobody
catch
to
them,
regulate it. Yeah.
if we don't have air police, then how is that being enforced, right?
That'll come with flying cars.
Yeah.
Now there are examples, and we've seen this in my experience as an attorney. I've seen where there can be community complaints about these restrictions, and the FAA can come in and investigate, and they will at times, depending on what's triggered. So you can see situations where, operations are shut down if they're unsafe. Yeah, they have the authority to investigate unsafe operations. They have to, because you can have situations like we've seen recently where you've had, so they absolutely can come in, but it's just like law enforcement. Law enforcement ultimately can make they have discretion whether they want to, investigate further or do whatever. So, I don't want to give you all the impression they never, because they can, but they ultimately are, have the authority. So, next, please. So FAA Order 5190.6B, Airport Compliance Manual. So this is actually in their compliance manual and again, forgive me if I'm not using the right nomenclature. I'm sure our friends from the county can correct me. But restriction on touch-and-go operations. So touch-and-go operations is always a major component when you have residential neighborhoods nearby, because this is In general aviation, generally it's private parties or some type of aircraft management or flight schools, you're going to have a lot of kind of touch and go issues. So it's considered an aeronautical activity. It cannot be prohibited by the airport sponsor without justification. For an airport sponsor to limit a particular aeronautical activity for safety and efficiency, including touch and go operations, the limitation must be based on an analysis of safety and/or efficiency and capacity and meet any other applicable requirements for airport noise and access restrictions explained in Chapter 13 of the Order, Airport Noise and Access Restrictions. So there is a path to restrict touch and go operations, but it has to fit within, I'll read it again, for an airport sponsor to limit a particular aeronautical activity for safety and efficiency. So you got to start with safety and efficiency. That's kind of the starting point of limitations. You have to have safety issues or efficiency issues that impact that.
So I'm going to stop you here.
Yes, ma'am.
This is where we need to drill down then. Where's the case law that interprets what is a safety issue or an efficiency issue or an analysis based on safety and or efficiency and capacity and meet all other applicable requirements for airport noise and access restrictions? Where are the cases that interpret this part of this regulation? Have we looked at that?
No, so I don't know that there are any specific cases that are on point. There are some cases that touch on it, but this compliance manual this is kind of how the airports operate. So each airport, whether it's a general aviation or a international airport, has a manual and a compliance about how they're supposed to operate. So some of this is not defined. In other words, there may not be cases on point specific to this.
Do we know of any cases where a city has come in or a county has come in and said, based on the airport compliance manual, we're going to restrict touch and goes for safety reasons, for noise reasons, whatever it may be, and it's been upheld?
So I was not able to find a specific case on that. I did reach out to an aviation attorney that I've worked with for other clients. He was going to delve further into that. I just wasn't able to get the information for the meeting today. But again, this is an ongoing discussion. Obviously, we'll update you all. The one thing I'll point out though in our conversation was because the FAA has rulemaking authority, they generally are given broad discretion when it comes to that. So when they say here safety and efficiency, ultimately the decider whether it's safe and efficient comes down to the FAA. It could be the FAA compliance officer can ultimately make that decision.
I mean, you're talking about the branches of government. So we've got an executive branch that creates these agencies, and then we've got a judicial branch that interprets the law.
Of course.
So my question is, how has the judicial branch interpreted this, or did they give discretion to the executive branch, that admin committee? To me, this is where the heart of this analysis will matter for our rulemaking abilities. So to the extent your colleague gets back to you, I would like to continue to be updated on this, because this is where we drill down right here.
Absolutely.
Miss Shelley, Miss Weiss, have you found any case law on that? You don't have to come up. Just if you found any, let us know.
We found case law that states the opposite of what he's saying as well.
If you look at Griggs versus Allegheny, there was also one in Jacksonville, there was also one Fields versus Saratoga, Manatee. This is all Supreme Court and federal court cases.
Okay,
Mayor,
make
the
sure you
public-
get that information to us.
Yeah,
Let's wait for public comment.
Okay, my bad. I knew they would know. If there was case law, those two ladies going to know where it's at. They'll find it. They know where it's at. All right, go ahead, Jeremiah.
And Jeremiah, just real quick on this specific point, I spent 7 years in D.C. and fought the administrative state. It wasn't specifically outlined, but the rulemaking authorities that the federal agencies have would bury this somewhere to where it could really, hamstring us. So I think just kind of a follow on to what the vice mayor was asking for, it would be good to see if there's any rules that applied. Thank you.
Absolutely. So next slide, please. So again, these are kind of some of the options that y'all can consider. The city of Palm Coast is preempted for passing a noise ordinance related to aircraft noise. So the case law is specific on that. So we can't pass a noise ordinance because it would be struck down. We can work with the FAA to restrict the use of touch and goes, and I think that would be probably the best path. We can bring the safety and efficiency concerns to them. There is a pathway to do that in their own rules to work with FAA on that. So that's something that we could explore further. I was going to recommend to the council as well, this might be something as we go further into this and kind of develop this more, is maybe hire an FAA board certified aviation council that is helps local airports with this specific thing, because there are firms that have specifically worked with local government to address these concerns. It's not uncommon, right? I mean, you have airports all over the country, so you're going to have these issues, but it's a very specific, nuanced area of law. With all due respect to everyone involved, anyone can go on and Google case law, but there's a lot more to it than just finding a case from several years ago or a statute. There are relevant, recent interpretations of this that are very clear. The pathway really is to work with the FAA to restrict the use of touch and goes. That would eliminate probably 90% of these issues from our interpretation.
So, I mean, I would think that this should be a cost that we would split with the county to see if the county is interested, because it's their airport, but our residents are affected, i.e. their residents are affected because city residents are county residents. But I mean, I would be very interested to see what a aviation attorney has to say, and then whether or not they can assist us. If going to the FAA and seeing if we can regulate touch and goes through the FAA is the way to go, I don't know what that process looks like, but I would imagine that somebody who practices this area of law could assist us in that. So I think that's an option. I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are, but I would hope that the county would be interested in sharing that cost with us.
Of course.
Is that it?
That's unfortunately right now again, we're going to continue looking in, talking and bringing information back to you all, but I think at some point, our recommendation would be to consider, for y'all to give some consideration to that. Obviously that you have a county component to this. The county it's their airport, right, ultimately.
Well,
But y'all's residents are impacted, who are also county residents, as Councilmember Montieri said. So there is a pathway to adjusting this. It's not impossible. It's not impossible to get touch and go operations looked at or removed. There's a process to do that. And I think, we may be at the point where, this is worth further study and evaluation. So.
Yeah, and I really think the burden should be on the county because it's not our airport, but I'm willing to compromise and do what we have to because it affects more of our residents than not. So anything else from the dais?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree that I think we should explore that path. I think part of that evaluation should be realistically, what that path looks like in terms of success, so we don't go down a rabbit hole and throw money at it. Yeah. But if there is a path, then I think we should explore it.
Well, yeah, that's why I specifically asked Mr. Mingo if they had an aviation attorney on retainer. Anything else? We'll open it up for public comment. Come on up, Ms. Weiss. I know you're coming.
Hi there, Gina Weiss, Quail Hollow. To the attorney, I can't see your name, I'm sorry. But when we were dealing, because we dealt with the FAA, the district office in Orlando. We even had some FAA people come down to the airport. I was there at one of the meetings we had in Phoenix East. So it goes back and forth. It bounces back and forth, okay? The FAA agent tells us, well, that's up to your county to control this, okay? So now I'm hearing something different, that it's the FAA that controls it. So it just goes around and around in a vicious cycle. I just wanted to make that point. But also, there was an airport advisory committee 5 years ago. It was disbanded by Jerry Cameron because he said that the bylaws were weak and they had to be rewritten. In other words, that advisory committee had no power. So he supposedly instructed, and this is documented, he instructed Al Hadid to start rewriting the bylaws. And there was supposed to be another committee created. That was never done. I spoke about this several times at county meetings. I was completely ignored. So I think it's a good idea to establish an airport advisory committee, have people from all different areas, you know, from public sector, from local government, to try to, you know, resolve and bring the issues from the public to the local officials. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else for public comment? Yes, Ms. Shelley.
Darlene Shelley, K-Section. So I don't think that I'm getting through from the comments I made before. The FAA provides advisory guidance, and this is according to the 125-page template that the county cherry-picked out the verbiage that fit their agenda. FAA provides advisory guidance. Chapter 33, Florida statute, establishes the legal mandate, and that's the city as well as the county. They have the opportunity to amend your comprehensive plan, your land and use development, your FLUME. All the things that are supposed to protect the residents, you can use that verbiage to protect the residents. And then the third, guidance, legal mandate, and then the local airport is supposed to do specific implementations. All they can do is voluntary, and we know that the voluntary rules are broken all the time and there's no repercussions. But they can also amend their outdated 2008 airport rules and regulations to, they're allowed to, in the rules and regulations, put a fee for touch and goes. 333 is where you have your authority. 3302 says airport hazards and uses of land in airport vicinities contrary to public interest. It's hereby found that airport hazards endanger the lives and property of users of the airport and occupants of the land in its vicinity. And also, if of the obstruction type, it's not, in effect reduces the size of the area available for the takeoff, maneuvering, and landing of aircraft, thus tending to destroy or impair the utility of the airport and the public investment. And further found that certain activities and uses of land in the immediate vicinity of airports, as enumerated in 33303, are not compatible with normal airport operations and may, if not regulated, also endanger the lives of the participants, adversely affect their health, and otherwise limit the accomplishment of normal activities. That the creation or establishment of an airport hazard and the incompatible use of land in airport vicinities is a public nuisance and injure the community served by the airport in question. Therefore, it's necessary, in the interest of public health, public safety, and general welfare, the creation or establishment of airport hazards, and a legally possible exercise of police power. And I am asserting to you that it's my firm belief that excessive airport operations are a hazard. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Ron Long, Aldo Drive. Can you go back a couple of slides right before, one more right there, go back. When it says takeoff or landings, whenever a plane is put into a circling pattern, are they considered in takeoff and landing status, which would allow them to fly lower over the neighborhoods while they wait their turn to, or are they required to circle at the 1,000-foot level? Just a general question.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not going to repeat everything. My name's Faith Walker again. But annexations, so one of the previous meetings that I was at, annexations in Florida, period, have not been done legally or went through any of the proper steps. So I think we have opportunity in Palm Coast to take a look at all our annexations and make them go through a legal process. That includes the airport. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else for public comments? Seeing no one come forward, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the dais. Okay, so what's our next steps forward? Working with the county to see about maybe restricting touch and goes?
I have a question, sorry, Mayor, for
Go right
the
ahead.
county. In the grants that you all receive, does it specifically state that the airport sponsors have to maintain a safe and efficient nationwide airport system? Do you know if that language is in those grants?
Mr.
I
Bruno?
ask because in accordance with an 11th Circuit opinion that interprets the U.S. Code, which does say that we can't regulate a lot of these things that we want to regulate. It's not just the FAA, it's the U.S. Code. I'm looking at it right now. But if that language is in some of those grants, it does even more so limit what we can do, because that basically means they have to operate a public airport.
Ms. Pontieri, it might be helpful if we write down the exact question that you have and get with the deputy county attorney. He was here earlier this morning, but I don't see him, and Mr. Seeger also left, so rather than giving a wrong answer, I'd rather just get the question and make sure we get a right answer to you.
Yeah, if the current grants that we have accepted have that language, I would like to know. But yeah, just for some of our residents, I mean, Chapter 49 of the U.S. Code has a lot of this information in it with regards to what we can and cannot regulate, and I'm looking at 11th Circuit. Now, this is a little bit of a different, it's regarding the types of engines that local airports can prevent from using their airports, but it is a Florida case, so I'm drilling down on it, but to the extent you all have other case law, I'm obviously willing to look at that as well. Please don't send me 25 emails. Maybe one email with all the case law you want me to look at, and I'll hit it all hard. But yeah, I would like Mr. Blocker a follow-up on those questions. And then, yeah, I think we need to work with the county and maybe talk to them about getting an aviation attorney that can help us work with the FAA and maybe really drill down on what we can and cannot do in conjunction with the county.
Yeah, I know certain airports have certain restrictions. We went out to San Diego last year for spring break, and there's a certain time of day that they shut off flights into San Diego. Did you guys know that? Yeah, they shut them off. They won't even let them fly in at a certain time period in the day. Okay, anything else from the dais?
I think, yeah, just the other route potentially is the fees, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a restriction, but it steers them in the right direction in terms of the time of day.
Yeah. Well, the big thing is, it's pilots, student pilots that are not from here, not from an aviation school based out of our airport, that are doing all these turns around our airport. It doesn't matter where they came from. That the guy that just crashed, he was coming, I forgot where, was he coming from, Stewart? He was coming from Stewart, and he's going to land in Palatka for some skydiving operations that weekend. So, you know, it's outsiders coming in and influencing our quality of life, and we need to do what we can. Okay, with that being said, let's move on to the next presentation. And the next one's a big one, and it's a presentation, Flagler County Coastal Erosion and Management, and that's Ms. Petito.
Yes, Mayor and City Council, while Ms. Petito and Mr. Salinas are coming forward to get the presentation started, just wanted to kind of forecast the rest of our afternoon. It's 3:11, and I think this will be another kind of lengthy discussion. So I would suggest to you that presentations number 6 and 7 were regarding the strategic action plan. If you want to email me your individual questions or comments, both of those presentations were for informational purposes to get us started on our strategic action plan. So we could omit those presentations, and I could take questions directly from you via email or in any of our in-person meetings.
It works for me.
I'm fine with that. Everyone else fine with that? Yeah, the day is running long. It's great having these workshops, though, because we actually get to communicate. But
I was
some,
wondering if we were going to set a record here.
yeah, some topics are a little bit more.
I don't know what the record is for the longest meeting.
4:30. We
Well,
went from 9 to 4:30.
Well, at least we have everyone here, and I hope
this is
Mr.
gonna be a
Stevens is
topic.
better soon. All right, Ms. Petito, are you ready?
I think so.
Yes, ma'am, go right ahead.
All right, well, thank you guys for having me. I'm Heidi Petito, I'm the Flagler County Administrator. I have with me today Jorge Salinas, the Deputy County Administrator. And then we have two people from our engineering team. We've got our county engineer, Mead Tabassian, and also our coastal engineer, Ansley Keyren. I think I have that correct. But thank you again. We're glad to be here, and thank you for allowing us an opportunity to provide you an update on Flagler County's coastal erosion and beach management plan. We've worked really hard over the last couple years with community outreach and public engagement to get to this point. So we just really appreciate the partnership and collaboration that we have with our municipalities, and we're glad to share where we're at on the county's beach management plan. So when we started this process, probably about a year and a half ago, Jorge and I have actually gone out and probably done about 25 of these. Everybody kept asking, like, well, what's the name of the barrier island off the coast of Flagler? Well, it doesn't have a name. It was man-made. It was created by Find many years ago. I'm not going to go through a lot of the history. I think it's been a long day for people, so we'll probably just move along. As a coastal community, there are several county-wide benefits. Our county enjoys unique advantages that drive economic growth. It enhances the quality of life, and it strengthens our identity. Last year alone, we had just under 1 million tourists in Flagler County. So tourism really fuels the local businesses. It generates a significant revenue and job opportunity. When we looked at the numbers from last year, for those of you that attended the State of Tourism in Flagler, tourism alone equated to $890 million in economic impact last year in Flagler. And that supports just under 12,000 jobs. So about 23% of our workforce is working in tourism-related industries. And when I talked to Amy about, tourism and how does that correlate with the beach, she said easily 50% of the people that come here because of the beach. So think about that for a minute. If we didn't have the beach, you'd be losing roughly, maybe half, if not more, of that $890 million impact. It would affect the 23% of the workforce that lives here in our community. So when you look at our coastal environment, we foster a high quality of life, offering recreation, natural beauty, and a strong sense of place. I think that our coastline defines our community's identity. Think back to why you moved here and what attracted you here and why people continue to move here. I think that investing in coastal resiliency will ensure a long-term sustainability, which will protect both our economy and our way of life, not just today, but for future generations. I'm not going to go into a lot of great detail about the history. I think if you've been here long enough, you've probably witnessed it yourself. I think that Hurricane Matthew was really a turning point for our community. Back in 2016, we've been under a local state of emergency ever since, so we've actually renewed that every week, 192 times over the last 8 years. So the only way that we're going to be able to exit these emergency conditions is really to put in place a local funding strategy and a funding ordinance that gets us out of this cycle. When we talk about the cost of inaction, doing nothing certainly is an option. I don't suggest it. I don't think that it's a very good option, because without having a proactive beach management, our county risks severe economic, environmental, and community consequences. So erosion, not only will it threaten tourism, which is a key revenue driver in our community, but you're also going to have diminished public access and recreational opportunities. So unchecked coastal degradation can lead to property damage, increased flooding, weakened storm resiliency. It can put infrastructure and homes at risk. Coming into this meeting, I think you all were provided with some backup documents. One is kind of like a summary. The other one might be more of a comprehensive beach management look at what it would be to Flagler. And when you talk about coastal erosion and you combine that with storm surge, just because of the proximity that we have of our community to the Matanzas Inlet, we are prone to flooding. So any low-lying area, any area that touches the intercoastal saltwater canals currently is susceptible to having storm surge challenges. We saw it with the hurricanes that we had before, where you had many homes and docks in Palm Coast that were underwater. Well, now add on to that storm surge. So if you don't have dune or dune system that's in place,
and you end up having these large tidal events where you've got washover coming onto the Barrier Island, going across A1A, you are going to definitely compound that problem and create more of a tidal increase and storm surge risk along those low-lying areas. When we looked at the mapping that is out there from NOAA, and it's in the backup that I had provided, if you look at a Cat 1 or a Cat 3, so like a Dorian or an Ian, there are impacts. The C section, the F section, the sanctuary, the woodlands, when you go down Colbert Lane, even sections of Grand Haven, are all going to be impacted. When you go into unincorporated Flagler, there's impacts. Even in Flagler Beach, on Lambert, on John Anderson, on Palm Drive, all of those communities are going to have some negative impact with not just the storm surge, but if it's combined with a tidal event where you've got washover at the beach. So Flagler County recognized the need to develop and implement a comprehensive beach plan. So in 2021, Flagler County had sponsored the beach management study. It was intended to identify the needs, the goals, and the implementation requirements. So subsequently, the beach management plan was adopted by our board in October of 23. We've got 4 different beach and dune renourishment reaches or sections of the project. Each one of these is a little bit different. They've got some pretty unique characteristics and also some funding sources. So it's easy for us just to kind of break those apart because they do vary between the reaches and some of those environmental conditions. So we're going to go over the first one, which is the Reach 1, which is the Army Corps of Engineers project that got completed last year. This was in the city of Flagler Beach, and so that it encompasses the 28th Street South to 6th Street South. And part of that implementation included not just the Army Corps portion, but you have 2 different tapers, non-federal tapers to the north and to the south. When we looked at this project, we wanted to include those areas, so we worked with FDOT to come up with some local funding on that, and we were able to put about 1.7 million cubic yards of sand over that stretch, and it's about 3.4 miles. It was completed right before Labor Day last year at a cost of about $29 million. So then we move on to Reach 2, which is really a permit modification and a design. This will include non-federal segments of coastline in Flagler Beach, the town of Beverly Beach, as well as Painters Hill. It'll actually go about 1,900 feet north of Varn Park, which is a county-owned public park. Right now, the county is seeking to modify our existing DEP and Army Corps permit, which would allow for a comprehensive beach and dune restoration along that entire reach. What we were looking at doing or proposing was to do it by dredge using our offshore sand source. And it'll probably end up being a little bit more. It'll probably be about 1.8 million cubic yards of sand for the 5.5 miles of shoreline. We are estimating that cost to be about $35 million, and we anticipate starting probably early summer. And then the future maintenance of Reach 2 is also going to include an area that had not previously been done, which is actually south of the Army Corps project. So if you're familiar with Flagler Beach, there's a section where FDOT had recently installed some sea cant walls. If you're looking at this map, it's that piece all the way to the south. It adjoins Volusia County. We're going to go back in Reach 2 and develop that and be able to put back a dune and a beach. So you can't just leave a seawall bare. You have to put sand in front of it. If not, you're going to have continued erosion in front of that seawall. So we're going to include that in our next reach, which will be Reach 2. And then moving forward, we've got Reach 3, which will be permitting and design. Right now, this is the area that's going to be north of Varn Park. It encompasses some communities of Hammock Dunes, Ocean Hammock, Hammock Beach, Sea Colony. It's going to go just south of Washington Oaks State Park. Right now, we're looking at dune only and some emergency type projects that we're going to be able to pursue until we can overcome some of those permitting challenges. So that's an area where we start to see what they're calling hard bottom. If you're familiar with the area, you'll see rocks that are actually on the beach, as well as rocks that are submerged into the water. This area does require us to do an environmental assessment, which is going to take some time. It does require some additional permitting. So this is an area that's going to be a little bit more difficult to do. We're not sure if we're going to be able to do a dredge project there due to the environmental sensitivity of those rocks. It may end up being a truck haul project. The significance with that, when you're looking at the cost of material for a dredge project, it's about $25 a cubic yard. When you're looking at a truck haul, it's about $75 a cubic yard. So it's about 3 times the cost. It's not as efficient, obviously, due to the expense, but we might not have any real opportunity to debate that with the state or federal government. We are looking to continue to pursue an Army Corps study. If you've been here long enough, you may recall that the county had done a what they call a Back Bay Shoreline Coastal Storm Risk Management feasibility study, and it's really to maximize that federal protection. So we had done that at the time. They were calling it a 3x3 study because it was 3 years and $3 million. Well, now they're calling it a 4x4, $4 million in 4 years. But that is a priority for us, and we're working with our lobbyists and government officials to make sure that we have that federal funding set aside for that. When we're looking at moving forward with this project, realistically, because of the permitting requirements and the delayed, process in getting this started, we're probably going to start this permitting and design in probably late spring, early summer of 2025. We don't anticipate starting construction on that until 2027. So that gives us a little bit of time to come up with some funding because we currently have some shortfalls. And then when we look at Hurricane Milton, and this would be for the FEMA, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with Category B and Category G, but Category B is your emergency protective measures following a storm, and then your Cat G is going to be building back to what is considered the engineered beach. So 2 different things. One would be the emergency measures. The other one would be building back that facility. So we engaged with our consultant to start work back in November of 2024. They have completed the Cat G work for us, and we've submitted that to FEMA for consideration. It's just under $12 million is what they're anticipating that cost to be. It will have a local match of about $2 million. They're continuing to do work in that area, looking for Cat B, again, which is your emergency protective measures. So that's where we're at with those projects right now. So then, I'm sorry, did you have a question? Somebody? No?
Sorry, I do have a question. So just for my understanding, when we're talking about Cat D versus Cat G, we're talking about Cat G is building it back to what it was prior to a storm, and Cat D is then preventative for the next storm. Is that correct?
Before the storm.
Well, Cat B is typically what you call a preventative measure. So like it would be to put back a emergency dune berm, but we're not going to be building back, say, the
Okay,
beach.
so it's just temporary measures during
Temporary.
storm times. Okay.
Correct. And up until this point, that's all the county has done until we started with the Army Corps project. So I think it's significant to know the difference because I think people have seen the county put sand on the beach and they say, oh, it's, it's washing away and, we're basically throwing money into the ocean. It's intended to be sacrificial because it just serves that purpose of providing that emergency protection. So when we look at the initial construction of cost for the entire 18 miles, it's about $120 million. So far, we've committed a lot of resources in the way of labor. When you look at this chart, the column to the right is the local match, which is about $42 million. That does not include staff time, so like administration, county attorney's office, our GIS, our drones, our budget procurement, our TDC with the Dodge the Dune campaign. None of that is incorporated in this, including our engineering staff time. These are just hard costs that are for the construction of the beach and the dune. So when we're looking at this, the local share, as I said, is $42.4 million. And then when we're looking at coming up with a funding strategy for this, the first phase is that initial construction cost, which is where we are today. But based on planning assumptions and estimates, it's going to be close to that 120. When we're looking at the shortfall that we have, Right now, the county has set aside $5 million. It's in our fiscal year '25 budget. We also have submitted some grants to the state for not just DEP, but also going after some program funding for the areas where you have critically eroded beaches. But even if those grants are fully awarded, we still have a $22.4 million gap that we need to address in the next 3 years. So then, following the initial construction of the beach and the dune, it would be anticipated that you're going to have ongoing future maintenance and renourishment. Our outside consultant engineering, coastal engineering firm is looking at a 6-year interval. So when we look to do that periodic maintenance and renourishment, we're looking at the approximate cost of about $97 million, and that's the entire coastline of Flagler County, so 18.1 miles. The local share is about $72 million, so that's what you're seeing kind of in that top chart, and then that bottom chart is when you take that $72 million and you break it up to create the equivalent annual cost, which is basically just taking that number divided by 6. So that makes that local amount that we need to generate every year $12 million. And that would cover everything. That would cover the Army Corps section where you have a 50% match, and then it would encompass all the other work that's going to be required along that beach. And coming up with a way to fund it over every 6 years, so then that way we have enough money in the account, so that way, you know, if you have storms, whether they're named or not named, we still have a funding source allocated for that. So an actual potential funding strategy has yet to be adopted by our board for this, but I wanted to share with you some information that we were able to put together. The important thing for us is to make sure that we're ensuring that we have public access to the beach. So if we're using public funds, we need to make sure that the public maintains access. It's vital for tourism, it's vital for our community well-being, as well as our economic stability. So we accomplish this through perpetual easements, customary use protection, and our emergency declarations, where we're safeguarding public enjoyment of our shoreline while preserving property rights. These measures ensure that we have uninterrupted access for recreation, storm recovery, environmental management, reinforcing our coastal identity and supporting the local economy. So our proactive policies protect the shared resource for current and future generations. So when we looked at potential funding opportunities, and this is something that we had created probably a couple years ago, we were evaluating several different funding options to look at the different ways, and I think we've taken a lot of consideration into play when we're going to what we're going to show to you and what we've been able to accomplish, because we've heard from so many people about, you know, maybe different things, and it was great in the beginning, and then over time we're kind of vetting those options. But so it really comes down to these key components. And so when we're trying to come up with a funding source that's going to be reliable, we think that we need to include some tourist development bed tax funding to that. We also talked about doing a special assessment in the form of a municipal service benefit unit, or an MSBU. And that would be on the barrier island for those parcels. And then we also looked at some other sources of general revenue, looking at the local option sales tax, and then also looking at a dedicated millage. And when I say millage, it would be a portion of the county's millage. It's not a millage increase. We would look to carve out part of our existing millage and dedicate it to this benefit. And then supplemental disaster recovery, that's what you would see post-storm. So that's going to be your FEMA, your Cat B, your Cat G, working with DEP and with FEMA to, DEM and DEP to go after some of that funding. So I'm just going to quickly go through each one of these just to break it down. So tourist development tax, some of you might be more familiar with it than others. It's something that's allowed through state statute 125. Currently, we're allowed to levy up to 5%. The county does levy 5%. The way it is right now, 1%, or one of these pennies, is allocated to beach activities in the form of, beach park facilities, renourishment, protection, things like that. We're looking at right now, we get approximately, I think it's about 4.8 million roughly for the year. About 900,000 is what gets levied towards the beach. And then the local option half-cent sales tax. This is something that the county had adopted back in 2012. It is allowed through state statute 212. And so with that half-cent sales tax, every municipal partner benefits and receives a portion of it based on your population. There's a state formula. And at this point, Flagler County is the last one in the state as far as being a small county. We are the last small county in the state of Florida to levy the full 1%. So I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but I am making sure to remind policymakers and the public about the potential funding source that is available. When we look at what we're levying today across the county, it's about $10.4 million. The county's portion of it's $4.8 million. We've used this fund to support infrastructure needs, so we've used a portion of it for roads. We've used a portion of it for the jail expansion. We've used it for building new fire stations. So as it is right now, we use that for infrastructure needs. But there is another half cent that is available should the county decide to levy it. And
So I just had a question. So for this option, what you're saying is you currently already have a half cent and that generates the 10.4, which 4.8 goes to you. And then, so an additional half cent would generate that same money.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And ma'am, was that a county commission decision versus a public referendum?
It doesn't require a referendum. It requires supermajority of our board. So you need 4 out of 5.
Okay, thank you.
Has this option even been discussed by your board? And if so, has there been any inclination that they would vote that way?
It has been, and I think I have it coming up on a future slide, it has been discussed in one-on-ones with individual commissioners. As a board, they have not come together to consider this option. I plan on bringing it up publicly at our March 3rd workshop, but I thought it was important to at least share what staff is looking at, so you're getting it basically at the same time that they're going to be receiving it. We've got these workshops scheduled. It started, I believe it was last week. The days run together. And then we continue to provide these through March 3rd. So March 3rd is our final day. We'll be presenting it to our board as well as the town of Beverly Beach that day. Okay. So they'll be able to hear it then. And then what we really wanted to do is have everybody have the information so that when you all come together at your next joint meeting, you can have a thorough discussion.
Well, and that was, that's part of the reason I ask is we have, I think, City Manager, you said next week is the joint public safety meeting, right?
Correct.
So we've talked about this half-cent sales tax being dedicated to public safety. And so, and I mean, I hear what you're saying. I agree that the beach is a huge draw for tourism and residents. I myself did not move here for the beach. I moved here because it was about $15 less a square foot than St. Augustine. But I hear what you're saying, and I agree that there is definitely value there. That being said, everybody benefits from public safety, and you're talking about a half-cent sales tax that a lot of people, specifically when they come here to visit, they never step foot on the beach. You yourself said about 50% come here for the beach. That means that about 50% come here not for the beach. So when we're looking at doing this, possibly entertaining this extra half cent, I don't know if there's more appetite to dedicate it to this or to use it for public safety, because they're all general fund monies, right? I mean, what have you spent, or I guess what fund has been spent on beach renourishment thus far?
Up to this point, there hasn't been any local funding. The only funding that's been utilized is through the TDC.
Okay.
So there hasn't been any general revenue, but to your point, yeah, the half-cent sales tax is considered general revenue. It can be used. Mm-hmm. The first time that the county had put it out, I thought it was with the restriction that it was for infrastructure, or it could be used for operating costs related to those infrastructure things. So in other words, like if we used it to build the jail, then a portion of it could be used for the operation of the jail. But what I'm not proposing, and you'll see as I go through this, I'm not proposing that if the board was to consider and approve the half-cent sales tax, I'm not suggesting that all of your money would have to go to the beach. So if.
No, I
it
see in your
was-
presentation, you're saying half would go, and then we would keep
50%, yeah.
the other half. No, I get that. I guess my point is more, when we're looking at imposing a half-cent sales tax on everybody that spends money in the county, does it make more sense to dedicate that towards public safety, which everybody feels, or the beach, which not everybody, arguably, people who don't come here may not go to the beach. People on the west side may not care much about the beach. So I'm just trying to think through this in a very high-level, robust way. To your point, this is the last half cent we have. What's the best way to utilize it? And if we're opening up general fund monies that are a little more fungible, then that benefits you all anyways. Because then you're not dedicating those general fund monies towards public safety. You've got monies coming in to dedicate specifically towards public safety. That also allows transparency for the public, because if we have a half cent that's specifically dedicated towards public safety, they know exactly where it's going. It's come in, it comes in per penny for penny, no pun intended, and then it goes out, and we know exactly where it's going. So I just throw that out there kind of as a premise to our meeting next week, and just in my thinking as far as, and also wanted to know what was previously being put towards this. If TDC is it, then that answers that.
900,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have TDC funds that's going towards it now, which is roughly about 900,000. When you look at the cost, the ongoing cost, you're not going to be able to cover it with TDC alone. To your point, I think everybody's community needs are different. So like when you look at the city of Bunnell or the city of Flagler Beach, they have their own police departments. So it's not maybe the same impact that they have that you may have, or the county may have. So we use general revenue dollars to support the sheriff. So to us, it's just exchanging one bucket for another bucket. To us, I don't know that it would really have much of a difference or an impact, because it's all general revenue to us. So.
1/5 of that 4.8 goes towards beach renourishment.
Out of the TDC, correct, right.
Are you proposing too that another 3% of the capital projects money from TDC should go to this?
We'll get to that in a second, if I can
Okay.
just go through these. The thing that I wanted to touch on, though, is the ad valorem property tax. We do think it's appropriate to use a portion of our ad valorem property tax. We're maintaining and protecting about 2 miles of public beach. There are 6 county parks that exist on the barrier island that equate to about 2 miles of the 18. So we are looking at a portion of the county's ad valorem property tax. Again, not increasing the millage rate, but carving out dedicated millage for that out of our ad valorem. So if we.
Ms. Petito, you have room in your budget to do that? To carve out 2% for a specific? Where are you going to flex in your budget to get that 2%?
Historically, over the last, I want to say it's been 5 years, we've reduced our millage rate every year.
By 1/10 of a mil.
By at least 1/10 of a mil, if not more. And so what we were looking to accomplish with staff is in the development of the budget for fiscal year '26, go into it knowing that we're going to be carving it out. We're going to be looking to reduce the millage, but in this case, it's not going to be a reduction in millage, it would just be a reallocation. So we've kind of built that into, when we build our budgets annually, our budgets haven't gone up significantly. On the board side, again, we fund all the constitutional officers as well out of our revenue, but if you look at the percentage of increase on the board side, it hasn't really gone up that much significant, I guess, that we're able to manage some of those expenses and kind of control the line. So that's kind of what we're proposing to do here with this.
Well, this is kind of, well, it's a little bit out of the bounds on this here, but are you guys growing your staff or reducing it or trying to maintain at a steady clip where you're at now?
I think it depends on what department you're talking about. So like in.
Largest rate of growth as far as employees are concerned in the county, at the county level,
Right now, it's probably public safety,
as far as the deputies?
the growth. Not just deputies, but fire.
department.
'Cause
Oh,
we're-
fire, okay.
Yeah, because we do countywide EMS, and then we have firefighters that cover the unincorporated. So I'd say probably largely you'll see it in public safety. That's where our focus has been. The other area that you might see some growth would be in the general services department, which is the people that take care of like road and bridge, roads, facilities, parks, things like that. So the staff that has to maintain and manage our community assets, our public assets, that's where you'll see. So,
City Manager, for the TDC, if I remember correctly, we use that for our roads, don't we, that tax?
No, not the bed tax, no. We've been awarded capital projects for the Southern Recreation Center of $740,000, so we've received that from the TDC, and then we've worked with them on several other projects.
So going back to 2011, I misspoke at the county meeting that me and Councilman Miller was at. I forgot the Southern Rec Center. But since 2011, the city has received only $1.2 million of that TDC fund.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the 1 cent, which is dedicated for capital. So that's where the money's going to different projects at this time.
It's the bed tax, correct?
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
From, or went to Indian Trails Sports Complex, Southern Rec Center, and all the other ones were for fireworks displays.
And Mayor and City Council, if you'll recall, probably several weeks ago, I sent you a flyer that outlined the different pennies that is collected through bed tax and what they can be used for.
Okay. Ma'am, I see all these different options that you're presenting, and we talked about the,
She's not done yet, Councilman.
well, you guys can interrupt, but I can't. What the hell?
No, I'm just saying.
Okay,
you're
at
saying
ease there,
that-
Mike.
Let her finish your options.
I have more questions, yeah.
Oh, God, y'all go ahead.
You want
Ask
questions, or do you want to,
Councilman?
We only have a couple more slides.
Yeah, I'll let her finish.
Okay. All right, so staff is currently exploring potential funding plan to support our initiative. However, it remains subject to formal board approval, review, and consideration before it can be implemented. I can walk you through the various elements of funding to kind of get to that required amount over the next 3 years. So if you bear with me, this is going to be for our path moving forward for the initial construction. This is not the ongoing maintenance and renourishment. This is just to fill the gap for construction for the 18 miles. So what we were proposing as staff was the current half-cent sales tax that the county receives. We would carve out this amount each year to get to that amount that we would need in 3 years. The second line, that Fund 1109, and then that Fund 1111, both of those are TDC funds. The difference is Fund 111 is what's already dedicated to the beach. The Fund 1109 is what they earmark for those capital projects. So what we would propose or want to be considered will require the TDC board and the Board of County Commission to see if there's an interest there for 3 years to not forego capital projects for 3 years so that that funding can be applied to the beach, and the funding would help cover the construction of the beach. I think when we're looking at a tourism standpoint and you're looking at the return on investment that you're receiving annually into this community, $890 million impact a year in tourism, and half of it may be from people that go to the beach. I think it's a small investment to make for that return of $445 million. So I think that's where we were at with it. And then, again, that small portion of ad valorem, that's going to help support the publicly owned beaches. And then we are pursuing some potential grant opportunities. We've already heard back on that $4.3 million that will be awarded to us. We're waiting for the remaining like $10.500. Early conversations with FDOT, there are several secant walls that they've installed along A1A. We would work with them to get an appropriation every year to cover some sand in those areas. And then we also have that carryover of $5 million that I had mentioned from the current fiscal year. So if we're able to do that, by the time we go to build that last and final reach, we'll have enough money. And that does not really impact any of the cities in that plan.
Let me say something, Heidi. Yeah, and this is still talking about the construction phase. We just completed construction for phase 1. All the $42 million part here that we need to collect is to complete Reach 2, 3, and 4 construction phase. The half-cent sales tax is just the county's portion of the current sales tax.
That's the county's
The county
Portion.
portion.
County's
Okay.
portion.
Yeah.
Yep, all right, got it.
So then this is a look at the ongoing maintenance and renourishment, and this would be that piece every 6 years that we need to have. So the target is 72 million in 6 years, which ends up being an equivalent annual cost of 12 million. Same kind of thing, if we're going to invest in the reconstruction of the dune, then we need to establish a plan to be able to maintain it, because I don't think it does anybody any good to throw money at the beach and then you're not going to maintain what you're putting out there. So right now, as it exists today, Flagler County is only obligated to the area where we have jurisdictional ownership, which is the unincorporated area. So it's going to be the Painters Hill North until you get to Beverly Beach. That's really the only jurisdiction that we have authority in. It would require some change of responsibility from Flagler Beach, Marineland, and Beverly Beach to be able to basically turn over the responsibility to the county. But I think in order to do that, we need to have a funding plan, a strategy in place that they all support, so that we're not stuck having the responsibility and then no funding that goes along with it. So same thing, similar approach that we as staff kind of are exploring or put together as a potential funding plan. It still needs to go in front of our board for consideration and hopefully some approval before it can be implemented. This just happens to be probably one of a million different options. This happens to be the one that we felt was the best option, considering looking at the use from tourism. I don't think I said it previously, but in talking to Amy Lukasik, our tourism director, about 30% of your sales tax comes from tourists that come into our community. So when you're looking at tourism impact, not just the bed tax, but they're contributing to 30% to that sales tax being generated here. I think it's a good option because tourists do go to the beach, but I think it also incorporates inland and coastal residents having a contribution back to the beach. And I think I said it before, when you're looking at our community and you're looking at the best tourism attraction, or I don't know if I'd call it the gem of Flagler, but it really is the beach. It has the biggest impact countywide, whether it's property values, tourism, job creation. It is our strongest asset, and one that I feel strong about that we should support. But I can walk you through this plan. This would be for the creation of a new half-cent sales tax. In the first couple years, it just really has the sales tax going in, and then you'll see in the second year an MSBU, which is that Municipal Service Benefit Unit. That's a $160 flat fee, and that's going to be for the properties, the parcels that are on the barrier island, because I do believe that they are receiving an additional benefit because they are on the barrier island. So this is their way of contributing in addition to the other ways that maybe they've contributed. And then when we look at the TDC fund, by the third year, after we're done with that third year of construction, we would no longer use the TDC capital fund. We would only be using the portion that's dedicated to the beach. We would continue to have a small millage dedicated to going towards that beach, again, because we do have 2 miles of publicly owned parks. And we still have grant opportunities that we can pursue every year. We do need to work with DEP on their state parks. You've got Gamble Rogers and Washington Oaks. So we do need to have them come to the table and provide some funding, as well as continued discussions with FDOT. When we had met with John Tyler a couple years ago, he had talked about $500,000, but if there's a possibility or a way to have the state increase their level of contribution, then that would go a long way in making this sustainable. So when we look at this, this was what we felt would be the best approach, so that in that 6-year interval, we have the money that we need. And then I can share with you what that would mean to you, and you probably may have already seen this on Flagler Live, but this is how it would be distributed. Any coastal community or the county would contribute 100% to the beach. And then Palm Coast and Bunnell, what we were looking at was 50% going to the beach management plan, and then 50% allocation would come back to those 2 cities. So if it went into effect in 2026, Palm Coast would have about $2.7 million coming back to them. City of Bunnell would have about $107,000 coming back to them. I do think, as I mentioned, I think when we're looking at our biggest tourist attraction and our community asset, it is the beach. And then this is really going forward, just kind of the next steps in implementing that beach management funding plan. I think it's going to involve continued coordination with the municipalities to determine what the level of participation looks like. We need to probably refine the funding strategy a little bit and then finalize some interlocal agreements. The process will follow a structured timeline, including stakeholder engagement, more meetings and board review or council review, and then whatever necessary approvals that we need to have to ensure that we have a fair and effective approach to that long-term coastal management plan. So this is just a brief kind of look at what some of those are, and then it just kind of continues with more work that we would have on our side to continue through those timeline and step. But I do think that it's time that we take decisive action and implement a comprehensive funding plan to protect the beach. This has been an issue that's been out there for 25 years. That has remained unresolved. I think we have and continue to engage the community, leverage tourism-generated funding, and we're prioritizing a long-term sustainability. I think together that we can secure Flagler's coastline, economy, and quality of life, because the time for delay is over, in my opinion. I think that we need to come together and make some tough decisions and really commit to a solution that benefits not just the county and the community, but also the visitors and the future of what this community is.
Can you go back to the one that has the breakdown, please, Ms. Petito?
Sure.
That one there.
This one? Okay.
Okay. I know from that meeting that we had at the county, even the beach communities didn't have the appetite. We shouldn't be using that word, but that's the word they used about that MSBU. So are you going to be able to persuade those communities to kick that in? And it actually seems like that's a small amount to me, considering the revenue that they get specifically from tourism. You said 30% of ours comes from, our sales tax comes from tourism. What percentage of those businesses on the actual beach, what percentage of their revenue comes from tourism?
I don't know that Amy...
I'm talking about skin in the game.
Yeah, I don't know that Amy had the numbers as far as where it's collected from. So when you look at the county as a total, 30% of it, about 30% is coming from tourism. So when you look at, where are the hotels located, I mean, you have Highway Hotels in Palm Coast, and then you also have a lot of vacation rentals and the Hammock Beach Resort, which is in the unincorporated area. You do have some, stays and some housing probably available in Flagler Beach or Beverly Beach. And then you have the restaurants and things like that, novelty shops that also play into tourism. So I don't know that they capture it as to where it's being collected from, but just, in total, I think that that's where it's coming from. But, and to your point, I think that MSBU, there is an option that maybe they'd want to consider. I know in the unincorporated area, we'd brought through the idea of doing an MSBU, and the county had taken the necessary steps to move forward with that in, as far as the legal requirements of, notifying the property owners, going through the process. So we have that available to us in the unincorporated. If the cities or towns chose not to do that, there is an option. Maybe they don't want to do that, and maybe they'd rather cover it maybe out of their own ad valorem millage, or maybe in the in those coastal communities, do they want to establish paid parking, and then maybe use that paid parking fund to contribute so that their residents aren't contributing? So I think we can probably talk through that. I think what the coastal communities kind of portrayed, and I don't disagree with you with their appetite or lack of, but I think what they're looking for is it not to be just placed on the barrier island. They're looking for everybody to have skin in the game. And I think that was probably some of the frustration that they've had, or that we've heard over the last probably 1.5 to 2 years that we've been working on this.
Specifically for Hammock Beach Resort, that MSBU, would that be the same for them as it would be for residential?
It's based on the parcels, so it's not based on an ad valorem property value. It's based on the number of parcels.
Is that, well, say they're one parcel of land, that's all they would have to pay as considering
yes.
the revenue?
No, they've got more parcels than that, but we'd have to, when I said that we'd have to fine tune this,
Yeah.
this was, Jorge and I trying to put together what we felt was somewhat palatable. I think when you look at the MSBU portion, there's probably room there that you could probably maybe come up with something different for commercial versus residential. And that's when I talk about like fine tuning, what does that funding strategy look like? We're just trying to put it to paper right now, just showing, okay, this is a possibility. We can go back and fine tune what that looks like.
Well, I'm personally glad you guys have actually come forward with a plan, because everyone was getting upset because, well, they have a plan. Well, let's hear the plan, and here is the plan in its, beginning stages. I'm sure we're going to have to flush it out a little bit. Anything else from the council?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. Councilman Gambaro gets first dibs at this one.
Thank you.
I am sorry.
Well, as you know, we're all, the council and the team here, we're all facing some hard choices here within the next 30 days, on the utility rates. I served on the school board when we did the last, we did a half-cent tax for IT purposes for the school district, which worked out great for our students. But, where I sit right now, I think if we're going to do this, we need to put it up to the voters in a referendum, okay? The citizens of Palm Coast could potentially get hit with a utility rate increase, and then if the Board of County Commissioners decides to move forward with another half-cent sales tax, I mean, that's on top of what's happening within the city of Palm Coast. So, to the extent possible, I'm always in favor of trying to let the citizens make the choice, especially on something, we're talking, $114 million over the next 6 years, and it's something that everybody enjoys, right? But team, that's where I'm at right now. I think for something like this, I mean, as an option, I know we would like to move faster. I don't know. I'm open to ideas. You have a special election for a referendum on this thing. They could potentially go south, but I don't know. But what I do know is imposing from a council or a board perspective an additional cost to their everyday lives, I'll get run out of my own neighborhood over it, okay? So I just throw that out there from where I sit. Thank you.
Can you go back one more slide too, Ms. Petito? Where is it at? Oh, the expiration of the half-cent sales tax now is 2032?
Correct.
That's correct, yeah.
It's 2032. Would this be tacked on to that? So if you did go with the half cents, the expiration date would still be the same as 2032?
I don't believe so. I think it's a 20-year, so it would
So
start.
it's an addition too. So really, this one's, 2032 is not that far away. Councilman Gambaro, you're getting old.
I'm younger than you.
I'm
Just you.
I'm just, you're younger than me? I'm 55.
Turned 47.
Oh, God, please. Go ahead, Councilman Miller, I'm sorry.
No, so I was just going to ask a couple questions. One was kind of revolving around that MSBU and kind of what that looks like, whether it's based on square footage or if it's based on a standardized unit that then would be extrapolated to larger facilities like Hammock Beach Resort and things like that. And I don't know if you have that now.
I don't have that number in front of me, but we've looked at several different variations of that. So when we were looking at the MSBU initially on the barrier island, we were breaking it up into 3 different areas where, maybe you had people that were along the coastal construction control line, the CCCL, or you had people east and west of A1A. When we were looking at it, there really wasn't much of a difference, because when you think about it, if people that are living on the CCCL, they've already, through their building, they've already had to accommodate through building codes, whether they're on pilings or whether or not they have a seawall. So they have certain protections built into the construction of their home that, is it fair and equitable So when we were looking at it, we were trying to maybe not go with different zones necessarily, but looking at having it split where maybe a portion of it would come from a flat fee, like a base rate that everybody paid, and then the remaining or the larger portion would be based on the taxable value of the property, whether it's vacant land or improved land, whatever that value was. So we were looking at that in the unincorporated area. For this particular exercise, we were just kind of coming up with a flat rate. What would that base rate be for everybody? Not taking into account, because if we're using our millage, right, we're using a portion of our millage, well, they're already getting taxed on that millage to contribute towards it. And then looking at the sales tax, well, then that's, another contribution that they have. So that's kind of like where we were at with it, trying to make it fair and equitable. But again, like I said, you could probably come up with a million different ways.
Right.
Yeah, we explore multiple scenarios, probably 8, 10 different scenarios, where, like Heidi said, we divided based on how close to the beach they were. The MSBU is a benefit unit, so we could increase the folks that were closer to the beach. And then we divided that, also had a municipal taxing unit, a TU, and that was based on the ad valorem. So folks that were closer to the beach, where their house value was much higher, their MSBU, which is the base, and the MSTU combined would be a larger contribution for those folks.
Yeah, I mean, I would advocate that we capture, the people that are having more defense of their personal property because of this action would have to pay more, right? Obviously, there's benefits to other people that live farther away. I live in the north side of the beach section, so I'm pretty far away from the beach. And so a beach intrusion, probably wouldn't affect me as much, but I still enjoy the beach. I use the beach. I grew up around here, went to the beach before I was a resident here. Some of my oldest memories of Flagler County is going to Flagler Beach in the early 90s when I was a kid. So I understand that it's a joint asset, right, that everybody uses. But then obviously some people benefit more than others. My other question was, does Volusia have a beach renourishment project or plan?
We're like the last county in the.
I don't know that they have a funding plan, to be quite honest with you. We're one of the last counties that have a beach management plan. For years, we didn't have one, but I know when I had talked to George Rechtenwald, the county manager down there, I think it was a challenge for them as well. So I don't know that they actually have a fully developed plan.
And to kind of follow along with that, is there any negative impacts of us renourishing that south side of the county on the beach and then them not renourishing the north side of their county? Does that increase, potential washout, problems with the beach because you're kind of sitting at two different areas that are not being maintained in the same way?
I'm not a coastal engineer, but it was my recollection, I thought that as it comes offshore, so like our sand will end up south of us. So I don't think, if they did nothing, I don't think it would be a problem. It would be the people to the north of us.
Right, where
Which they are.
Which they are doing something. Yeah.
But also there's a natural inlet there anyways, so
Yeah.
you can't renourish the inlet, so to speak. I would say in terms of what's been presented to us, I think.
We don't have to make a decision now.
No, I know. To me, a sales tax does help. Your points about public safety are well taken, but also a sales tax kind of socializes that cost to other people than just the people that live in this county. So to that, when we were talking about the 30%, my understanding is that when the sales tax is collected, it's distributed by population, not by where it was, where the sale occurred, right? So, there could potentially be more tourism sales in different locations, but we still get the lion's share of that because of the population of Palm Coast. But so if we were to try to go forward with this, I would advocate for the sales tax versus other taxes because of that, the fact that 30% of that's coming from somewhere else, not within Flagler County.
And you can see the forecasted revenues that we have here for sales tax. For the city of Palm Coast, it will continue to go up. Right now in FY26 is 5.4 million. For FY2030, it's expected to be 7 million.
I think Councilman Gambaro's point about a referendum is also a great point. If the residents are going to pay for it, I think that they should possibly decide whether they want to or not, whether they think that asset is valuable enough to them to pay that. Also, TDC, so we're talking about dedicating a specific portion of the capital projects fund to this for several years, and so that means all of those go away for several years. We've benefited from those in the past as well.
It would only be for the 3 years that we're doing the
years.
construction,
Yeah.
and then after that, it would just go back to the TDC. But there's no guarantee with that either. That's going to take the TDC board working with the Board of County Commission to agree to that.
Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of different parts, right? So we're talking about a lot of contingencies that have to happen for this to go through.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you for the presentation. It seems to me that a lot of these issues have been exacerbated, obviously, by natural disasters. So is there ability to continue to pursue FEMA and disaster relief grants as well? Because I see you just have grants generally, but are we still pursuing disaster-related and FEMA relief?
Yes. Yes, so we have, right now, we're not just the recovery grants that follow from FEMA, but we're also working with the state through DEP, what they call their program funding for the critically eroded. And I think the important thing is that moving forward with that that feasibility study, again, of going out and having the Army Corps do that 4x4 study, is getting them to recognize and designate more areas as critically eroded. So when you look at the 18 miles that we have about 8.1 miles that are critically eroded. That makes them eligible for that program funding through DEP. We'll continue to do that and hopefully expand those areas if we can continue to establish more public parking and connectivity to public. So we have to have access points every, is it quarter mile or half a mile? It'll open it up for federal funding through the Army Corps, but another kind of an outside of the box approach that staff had was applying to the state, DEM, for what they call the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. So you're probably familiar with it if your community has taken advantage of it. It's been used to maybe buy generators or make improvements to mitigate some of that risk. So we had submitted one where it's kind of, I say outside of the box, because it's kind of got two phases. One is to buy what's currently private property, that is beachside, and to mitigate the future loss by not allowing homes to be built, it would become publicly owned land. And so we're currently working through that grant project. We're in the first phase. We got to go ahead for phase one, and then following phase one, if approved, they'll go ahead and say, go forward with phase two. So we would look to acquire, we have identified certain parcels, and then it would pay for the beach and dune construction in those areas. And that's pretty sizable. I forget now if it's like 35 million or something upwards of that. But there are grant opportunities that we currently have that aren't in that table yet because we don't have that commitment, that agreement, that green light. We're in the first phase of it, but we're hopeful that they'll move forward with that. So that'll help too. And then maybe that'll change the whole dynamic that we don't need to tap into the TDC capital fund. But it's very fluid. And so like we're using our consultants' estimates based on today or the time that they were created. Every day things change. So, funding opportunities change, the climate, the coastal change. And so it's trying to come up with a plan based on the best information that you have at the time, but it's all subject to change. And every year, as we move forward with this, we're going to have to reevaluate the revenue coming in and what those forecasted expenditures are to make sure that we have the money when we need it at that 6-year interval. So it's kind of, I don't know, it's very fluid, it's very dynamic, and it's, ever-changing, so.
Yeah, I would think that with A1A being the only emergency evacuation route for a lot of people, that there would be a state interest in making sure that that road remains healthy and drivable. And we've seen in the past where it hasn't because of hurricanes. I have to be honest, I'm not in favor of tapping into the capital projects fund with TDC. There's so many people that come here for sports tourism, for business, that don't go to the beach, and if we're, you know, that come to we have USTA that comes and plays at our Southern Rec Center now. I just, you know, I think we need to keep that money separate and apart so that we're not putting all of our monies into that one tourist attraction, albeit a big one, I will admit, obviously. As far as the half-cent sales tax goes, you know, I know that when we previously had the joint city-county public safety meeting last year, Sheriff's Office came before us and let us know what their request would be to increase deputies. We had talked about this half-cent sales tax for public safety, and I have a very good feeling that we're going to be requested for, you know, additional deputies again this year, because our population's growing and there's a need. So I'm very hesitant to vocalize any support to use this for the beach, knowing that we have what I consider to be higher priorities that we cannot get grant funding for. We can't get grant funding for additional deputies. So, you know, it's tough. I don't envy your position. I am concerned, though, that there wasn't a larger dedicated funding source sooner. It seems that, you know, we've known this is going to be an issue. We're a coastal town, and I don't know what the history is in trying to get more monies for this coastal rehabilitation, but kind of like with our utilities, I feel like we're coming into the game late, and it's unfortunate at this point. So I think it's incumbent, though, upon you all to get approval first and foremost from the BOCC on these things, and then TDC, obviously, before we can ever even really start talking about taxing districts, and that's not even up to us. I mean, obviously, our residents would be somewhat affected depending on how far out you go with it. But, and I appreciate the presentation and keeping us in the conversation, I really do. But I guess we'll have to see what BOCC says, and hopefully, you know, I do look at this in conjunction with public safety, because we need to work together on how we're going to fund public safety, how we're going to fund roads, how we're going to fund, you know, beach renourishment. We're so closely aligned, and our residents, you know, I look at us we're on top of each other here, you know. I mean, we all have to work together on these things, but I have to prioritize, and that half-cent sales tax is so valuable, I'm hesitant to say, let's use it for beach renourishment. And I am in agreement. I also think a referendum is not a bad idea, letting the residents decide whether or not they want this extra half penny to go towards something that the community needs.
Well, if I could, if you were to levy the half cent for law enforcement or public safety, do you feel strongly that you would still put that out to referendum as well?
I don't see the difference. I do think it would have a better chance of passing, though.
I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, you done?
Mm-hmm.
Could you go to the next slide, Ms. Petito, please? I'm sorry, next one.
Next slide.
The one that showed the breakdown. So I know, because I was tracking all the legislative ask last session, the county asked for $29 million, and they didn't get it. Am I correct, Ms. Petito?
From the state?
From the state. They requested $29 million for...
We got $32 million last year.
Not the county as a whole. I'm talking about for the beach. They specifically requested $29 million.
We ended up with $32 million. It came out of the emergency legislative session that happened in December.
Okay.
And they ended up giving us $32 million appropriation.
All right. Where were we at when that happened? Where were we at?
It was right after the hurricane, is whenever they had the special session.
So the commitment for Flagler Beach, all the stuff that the Corps' done down there, they're committed to that for 50 years, right?
Well, it probably depends on who you ask, but I can only talk about our board, and maybe I've been with Flagler County, it'll be 20 years this August. So going back to when that happened, the county ended up entering into two different agreements. So we have an interlocal agreement with Flagler Beach, and then we have an agreement with the Army Corps, where we are the sponsor of the Army Corps project. We were handling the project on behalf of the city of Flagler Beach. The interlocal agreement with Flagler Beach authorizes us to take on that effort for them, and Flagler Beach recognizes the fact that they will take on what is known as the maintenance. Maintenance and renourishment are two totally different things, but maintenance would be, there's annual monitoring, there's trash pickup, there's, if there's an escarpment or kind of like a cliff, you're gonna knock it down, you're gonna, rake the beach, maintain it. So when the county entered into that agreement for the beach management plan, and at the time, the gentleman was not on our board, but he became our chair and had to sign the document. It was Donald O'Brien. And he made it very clear that he did not want to obligate future boards to the long-term commitment. And he wanted to ensure that by signing this document, that he was not saying that Flagler County and future boards would be responsible for that 50% match when the time came. It was always envisioned, and it's spread throughout various levels of public record, including when Melissa Holland was the chair of the TDC board, and Craig Coffey, the then administrator, had gone in front of TDC board, and they talked about who's responsible for it. It was always envisioned at some point later down the road that the county would enter into a new interlocal agreement with Flagler Beach, and that Flagler Beach would have to come up with the money. Now, we are the sponsor, so we are the only ones that the Army Corps will work with. They don't want 5 people to work with, so it was envisioned that the city of Flagler Beach, through an interlocal, would come up with the money, give it to the county would then pay the Army Corps. I don't know if that's how the leadership feels today. I really don't know, but that at the county level, that's what we've always believed. And so when we were coming up with a plan, and we would prefer a plan that's a community plan that has all of us working together, that's why we were looking at the entire 18.1 miles. But Flagler County specifically does not have authority or jurisdiction other than in the unincorporated, which is kind of like the 10 plus miles to the north, which is why we were moving forward with coming up with a plan for our area of responsibility. But then in doing so, that would leave Marineland, Beverly Beach, and Flagler Beach kind of out there on their own. So then we, probably me more so, staff gets criticized for kind of, maybe moving forward with something that doesn't incorporate the entire community. And it wasn't meant to be a slight or, done in disregard for their community. It's just that we don't have jurisdictional control there. We can't come in and impose ourselves on a community because they're established, through their own creation, have their own responsibilities. We're just trying to be a partner and come together with a community-wide solution, which is why we're presenting what we're presenting. I think that it provides a good balance to, local impact to the beach, as well as visitors, as well as the economic driver that it creates. I think when you look at people that move here, although they might not go to the beach, you look at real estate. How many real estate ads talk about proximity to the beach or the fact that you are a coastal community? I think people move here for a reason. I think it does help drive property values. If you look at the cost of housing where you're landlocked in Central Florida, I don't think that you're going to see the same home values that you see here. And if we were to lose that taxable value, even a small percentage, when the hurricanes came through, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, on the west coast of Florida, the governor had given them, kind of like a holiday where they didn't have to pay their taxes. Well, what would that look like here if we had a reduction in taxable value? What would that do to our school system? School systems don't get to generate their own millage rate. The state's going to tell them what their millage is and what they're able to collect. It would be catastrophic. So then what does that do to the quality of life, attracting businesses here, attracting people here? Because at the end of the day, we need more businesses to come into the community. That's a whole nother discussion, but we need to, kind of relieve some of the tax burden off of the residents by bringing in economic development. And if you're a community that doesn't invest in being a coastal community, it will definitely have a negative impact on bringing in economic development. Yeah. It's the same with school systems. People want to go where you have a healthy school system. It's another thing. So it's, I don't know, it's cyclical, and it's, it's a huge issue, I think, for our entire community, which is why we wanted to incorporate a plan that would hopefully bring everybody on board. But, again, I appreciate the opportunity and the time talking with you all today. And
I just wanted to clarify a couple things, if I may, Mayor. In terms of the Fund 1109, which is the capital fund for TDC, what we were proposing is only using it for the initial construction for a period of 3 years only. It will taper off once we start the renourishment programs. It's only for 3 years, and we're talking about $3 million approximately that we would recommend the TDC board to consider. The other piece was the MSBU. MSBU is only considered on the barrier island, so folks that live in Palm Coast and Bunnell and other places are not being considered here. There's about 10,445 lots that will be considered for this MSBU to generate that amount of money. The other piece I wanted to talk about was the risk factor. Risk factor, if you look at the beach, those are the folks that have the most risk at this time. But I live up in Sawmill, and if you have a Category 2 hurricane through Palisade Creek, we are on the west side of US 1 within the city of Palm Coast, and we will be impacted. So the risk factor goes beyond just the beach at this moment. So I just wanted to mention that. Also, the economic engine that this tourism development tax is for the county and the tourists coming here, it's $890 million economic driver. And if we lose the beach, we might lose, let's say, half of that, which would be a big impact for our small businesses here in the city and the county itself.
I get that. Go back to that slide again. I keep going back to that same one, the one that shows, not that one. Keep going. That one right there. I was in Okinawa in 2017 when Matthew hit, and at the time, I was even hitting Governor Scott up on Twitter. It's like, what's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again? I'm like, we need seawalls. And I think they did a phenomenal job down there. I was very impressed when I went down and saw the finished product down there. But we're always going to run that hazard. As a matter of fact, everyone needs to start paying attention. They're getting ready to come out with their forecast for hurricane on Friday. They're coming out with the hurricane forecast for the state. One thing to consider is we will, on this, Palm Coast is going to be doing the heavy lifting. You can look at the amounts of money. But that 50%, you said 2.7 will be coming to the city, right?
Right.
So the 5,405,000, half of that would be coming to the city coffers.
Correct.
And this is something I'd like everybody to understand about the sales tax. I'm sure everybody up here knows it, but the public in general, necessities are not taxed. Right. And what is killing the public in general is the grocery store, medication. Those things are not taxed. So for the mom and dad trying to feed their family, the sales tax doesn't hurt them as much unless they're doing a large ticket purchase. So that's just something to consider. But Ms. Petito, I really appreciate y'all's attention and bringing us the actual plan. And I'm sure it's going to be tweaked along the way, and we're going to have to get community buy-in, whatever we do. But it's going to happen. And those coastal cities should be looking at these numbers and like, wow, Palm Coast is lifting a lot of the weight here. If they look at that across the board, we are the ones doing the heavy lifting.
Well, and not for nothing, and I've said this many times, 44 cents of every single dollar of our millage goes to the county. So, that's why I do lean towards a referendum, because here we are going back to our residents again, and to your point, we're going to go to them about utilities in the next few weeks. So it's hard to continuously go back and back and back.
Safety.
And yeah, public safety, everything. I really think there is more opportunity out there for the disaster relief, the FEMA grants, and hopefully those will continue to come through. But we'll see what the BOCC's position on this is too, because that's a really important part that I think we have to get past.
And Mayor, City Council, if I can call your attention, we were trying to have the Northeast Florida Regional Council present the vulnerability assessment today. Unfortunately, they need a little bit more time and will come back later this year, but I did send you the data on their initial assessment. And that also, I'm going to put my emergency management hat on, and that also has some links to projections and simulators if you were to get a Cat 3, Cat 4, Cat 5 hurricane. And Mr. Salinas is correct that we would have impacts west of I-95 just of how our stormwater system drains, right? We are ditches, canals, and then into the swamp, and then the swamp goes into the intercoastal. So if we're backing up everywhere that can ultimately affect our stormwater system. So just wanted to put that information out there to you.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say this is a great analysis. I agree with you. And I see you go into a dashboard where I just wanted to ask, could we somehow put a link on our city website that ties into their transparency dashboard, just so the information's available, or however you guys think it's best, but just to get this out to our residents.
Yeah, I wanted to share something because the ad valorem taxes that come to the county, we develop a dashboard. We have a dashboard for many things, but one is, where does my Flagler County taxes go? Because those taxes that come in, you can see that a large percent is for public safety. You see law enforcement. This is all these here in State Road 100 is the default. You can actually put your address here, and it's going to generate where does your taxes go, the ones that come to the county, how they're distributed. So basically, all these pays 20,281 county taxes. Out of that,
7,000.
yeah, about 7,000 goes to the sheriff, which is public safety. The next line item is fire and EMS. The county provides EMS for the entire county. So that's the amount that goes to there. And then by department, how much we are actually dividing our costs. So you can see it goes down all the way to veteran services and all. But basically, the majority of the fund are going to our law enforcement, fire, and constitutional officers, because the county has to fund the tax collector through their fees, property appraisal, the clerk of courts. All these other functions are paid out of the county taxes. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that it's not only going for the BOCC function, it's divided through many functions for the county.
Yeah, giving people that dashboard will make them mad.
Really?
Some people get mad when they look at that dashboard.
But that's a fact, that's the truth.
Yeah.
Well,
No, it's a good
I know,
tool.
but it's a good tool, but it still makes you mad when you consider you're paying your ad valorem for the city that pays for the sheriff's contract, and then you're still paying to the county for the county's services for the sheriff. It'll make you mad.
It's a lot of money.
But I appreciate it, Ms. Petito. I think we are willing to work with the county, and the county's going to have to, decide what they're going to do, and we're going to do what we have to do. I think those beach communities, Beverly Beach was very, very, he was worse than me. People think I come off mean, but I don't mean to. I'm just stating facts the best I know them. So the mayor of Beverly Beach was like, oh, no. He said, I have seawalls.
Sorry, I have a quick question. Have you all looked at what could be generated from parking?
We had talked to the city of Flagler Beach to see if they had a plan, and I think that they were working on a parking plan, but I'm not quite sure. It did come up when we went out to talk to people, and at the time, we were a little nervous about if we were to implement parking at county parks. Well, there are public parks that people should be able to go enjoy, so some people said, why are you charging to park there? Because it's publicly owned. But if we were to implement parking in those county parks right now, before maybe Beverly Beach or Marineland or Flagler Beach decided what they were going to do, would we be pushing people not to use our parks and pushing them into areas that don't have paid parking?
Well, I'm not asking about parking at public parks. I'm just saying specifically the beach, because it's pretty standard charge for parking at beaches. I don't know of a single, and I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I don't know of a single public park that charges for parking. I don't know of a single beach that doesn't charge for parking, generally speaking. There's very few. So maybe Crescent Beach, do they charge for parking? I don't know if they do, but there aren't very many. So, I mean, particularly if you go down to like the Tampa Bay, Clearwater area, they all charge for parking. Where I'm from in Charleston, they all charge for parking at the beach. That's more standard. So, I mean, my question is, has there been any financial analysis done on what we could generate from paid parking at the beach only?
We don't have
No, okay.
jurisdiction in the area where you'd have paid parking.
Well, no, and
So it would be
yeah.
Flagler Beach, and I don't know the answer.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering if you knew if they did anything like that.
They haven't shared anything with us like that.
I think,
Yeah.
I think after we had that meeting, I actually posted on social media, if you want to fix the problem and get money for Flagler Beach, for the beaches, you build a couple of parking decks down there. And if I were a wealthy man, I would be the one buying the land and building it, but I'm not a
You don't
wealthy
even need
man.
parking decks, so you can use a QR code on the signs and have people do it that way, and it has minimal impact.
Yeah, but it's still limited. But if you were to put parking on the backside down there, better where the traffic light is, where the fish company, or to park all the way on the backside down on there where the land is lower, you put like a 3-deck parking garage down there with 1,000 parking spots, charge them $10 a day, you'd get that revenue in that you need for your maintenance. But
I know they've
I'm not
talked
a
about
wealthy
that.
man, so I can't do that.
They've talked about that for 15 years.
Well, they should have.
Off and on.
Parking, I have been here 19 years, and parking has always been an issue at the beach.
Yep.
And people will gladly pay. Look at St. Augustine's
They will
parking
pay.
deck. St. Augustine used to be by the hour, then it went by the day, and I think it's like $20 a pop now there
One in
just
the
to
parking,
park.
yeah, in the parking
It's
garage.
20.
Yeah, I'm serious, it is. It's like 20, am I correct? Is it
Yes,
like $20
20
a
in the parking
day?
garage, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a cash cow.
I think they switched it. I don't think it's per day. I think it's just like per entry or something weird.
It's a lot of money.
That, yeah.
We will search for parking in St. Augustine before you park in that
Yeah.
parking deck. I have a little secret spot. With that being said, Ms. Petito, we really appreciate it. Thank you for spending all day with us. You see how we operate now if you don't watch our meetings on
New
YouTube.
record. New
Public
record.
comment? Public comment?
Public comment? Anyone have any public comment? Everybody was ready to go home.
Shaking their head.
It's dinner time. I haven't eaten all day.
Mr. Blocker had to leave to go to another city's town meeting, so he had to skirt out of here.
Any final things from the dais?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. All right, so I've got two things. One, thank you for the thoughtful discussion. We covered a lot of ground, and I think these deep dives are important for us just to have the information we need to make the right decisions for our community. And you know, I think consistently we've been touching on quality of life issues, right? Short-term rentals, the airport, and, you know, just kind of pulling on that thread, I've got a third one that I think we need to discuss, and that's Ralph Carter Park, where I live in the R section, okay? I went out there the other night to look at the blaring lights across where the residents live on the backside. You know, my understanding is that park was designed to be a community park, not a sports complex. And then the sound, I mean, it was loud at 7, 8 o'clock at night. And so, you know, we're covering some of the same topics from a quality of life perspective. And in my estimation, it's important to be fair and consistent, you know, across the board. If quality of life is important in Seminole Woods or behind the airport or the C section, you know, it should be the same for the R section. So what I'm asking for is consensus to queue up this issue for us, to lay out all the facts, lay this issue flat, and have a discussion on it.
I think we have, I know the lady you met and you just talked to. What's her name again?
Petruzzi.
Petruzzi. And I had Shira upstairs. She did an analysis, Councilman, of the area, and I forgot the percentage. Brittany, you remember the percentage?
I think it was like 80%.
80% of the people that live in a good radius of that park moved in post-2009 after those lights were installed. So that was our basis, and I went out there, right after I met her, I went out there that night to where her house is. Yes, there's light, but Those lights have been there since 2009. I also went out there on that following Saturday morning, and it was around 8 o'clock, and it wasn't what the inhumane living conditions that Ms. Petruzzi puts on her emails.
Mr. Mayor.
So, yes.
I was just going to say, to me, I think it's okay to have that conversation, right?
We can have the conversation.
So I think that's all the
I'm
ask
asking
is.
for, just to
and,
lay all the issues flat.
You know, and I
have a
think that
conversation.
kind of goes back to what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, that, you know, if this is truly not the same thing, then that will be apparent, you know, during that conversation, right?
Yeah, well, I'll just tell you, I stood out there in her driveway, and that lighting is not okay. It is absolutely not okay. The other thing that's not okay is the amount of cars that were across the street with the kids running across. I know that might be a parent's issue because parking's available at Rimfire Elementary, but we've got to lay this issue flat and lay all the facts out so we can address the issues that need to be addressed.
I'm more than willing to have the discussion, but I don't, you know, really, I don't know what else we could do unless we shut that park down, and we're going to be cutting off thousands of kids.
That's the rest of the
from-
sports.
Yeah, that will not, I will tell you, I will, I would say over my dead body that'll happen. I'm not going to be that extreme, but I will be very outspoken about that being shut down. That's where too many kids go and play sports and stay out of trouble and have a good outlet to get, you know, I mean, team sports save so many kids and are so good for our community. I will tell you, being on council for the last few years and this being a repetitive issue, we have taken steps to alleviate the light issue. We put visors, we spent what, $40,000?
We spent $12,000 on the visors.
So $12,000 on visors. We also shortened the time that people are allowed out there. I think it's actually too soon. In my opinion, the kids should be able to play out there until 9 o'clock, and we've reduced those hours at the request of a couple residents. So, you know, can we have the discussion? I'm honestly not in favor of it. I'm not going to put up a big fight against it, but I can tell you it's going to be very hard pressed to get me to move and change anything out there other than the parking. I do think that, and unfortunately, we've talked about this, I don't think they're breaking any laws with the parking, so they can't really be ticketed, so to speak, but we have opened Rimfire for parking and the parents need to utilize it, and we have talked about some permit restrictions and even withdrawing the permit for the teams if they don't start utilizing Rimfire for parking.
So Vice Mayor, just an update on that. I did speak with the league organizer, Mr. Maxwell for Mad Dogs Flag Football this week, and told him that we cannot have them and that was a part of the terms and conditions for him to get a permit out at Ralph Carter, is that the parents needed to stop parking on Rimfire because the worst thing I think could happen is somebody getting hurt or hit by a car as they're walking, you know, to get to their car on Rimfire. Is why we've made accommodations and worked with the school district. And I told Mr. Maxwell that unfortunately, if his parents do not comply, then we're not going to be able to permit him out there, and we're going to have to move them to other facilities. Mr. Maxwell did inform me, and I checked with our park staff, that they're only out there for another week. March 8th is their last permitted time, and then for their spring session, they will have practices at Ralph Carter, but not games on Saturdays. They will move their games to Wadsworth Park in Flagler Beach on Friday evenings. So we would just have them there Monday through Thursday until 8:30. And again, also in that time period, daylight saving time changes, so the lights would not be on as long as they were previously. So that's just an update. I would look for exact direction of what you want from our Parks Department for this presentation, because we've had it before. And I don't know if you want a copy of that previous presentation or what specific information you'd like to discuss.
Well, thanks for everything you've done to address it, but quite frankly, it's a short-term fix. This will happen again next year. And then we need to address the lighting. The lighting is not okay. okay? And then, and I just think we need to, so those are the parking, the lighting, the noise, and quite frankly, I'm a huge supporter of our children's sports. And I think this is why, you know, it's important that as we look towards westward expansion, we set up an awesome sports complex down the road so we don't have these kinds of issues in our residential communities. And so, but I still think we need a workshop to discuss the long-term.
I have no problem putting it on agenda as city manager. We have consensus.
Yeah, I think so. I think
Thank
you
you.
hear the obstacles you have in front of you in terms of trying to convince, you know, a majority, but I think we should talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree, because I've been out there a lot, Councilman, and I would agree that I think the poles are too high, because, you know, treetop level, right, 100 feet. If they would have kept those lights down a little bit further, they're higher than 100 feet. If they would have kept them down and had something maybe to shield them in, I get it, but it's been going on, those lights have been there since 2009. And we did it. I like facts and figures too, and we researched it, and we checked all the properties that were purchased, and 80% or so were after 2009, after the lights were installed. So the people that didn't like it, they got out. I would assume they got out, or they passed away, and, you know, things change, economic conditions change for people, but those lights have been there since 2009. I remember taking my kids out there back then. So, but we can discuss it. City
Yeah.
manager, if you can get it on the schedule,
Yeah.
no worries.
We will cover lights and parking.
Lights, parking, and I think that analysis that the mayor.
I have the
I
statistics.
think that would be helpful to share. And what I'm hoping to come to is a happy medium, figure out how we can maintain the sports piece. You know, and is the park still considered a neighborhood park, or is it a sports complex?
Still just a park.
Park.
It's a park.
Okay.
I will tell you that we do need a sports complex. I mean, we need to plan for one somewhere, somehow. We need to actively start doing that. It's called out in the Parks Master Plan as well, and just that we're a growing community and we're seeing more kids in organized youth sports. So, you know, trying to identify a plan and a funding mechanism for that is important as well.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for your willingness to have the discussion.
No worries. I have people coming to me all the time. This guy came to me about a BMX track, and I'm like, wow, that is awesome. That would be great for the kids. It's just getting the funding and making it happen. But impact fees, that's why you got to make sure you get the impact fees that are required in a growing community.
City Manager, the other thing on the parking piece is, like, I know that the gentleman that runs the sports league has some food trucks out there. They're coming in, they're parking in along, you know, 4 or 5 different parking spots where parents could park with their kids. Just got to figure out maybe a better place for them to park. And so my second item was, I know I've brought this up a few times, but Royal Palms and Town Center, that intersection's only going to get worse, and it's a nightmare. And I know we're looking comprehensively at all the turn lanes and everything across the city as we look going in the budgeting cycle, but, you know, I'm still getting calls of, you know, how much does it cost to put in 3 stop signs there to better address the traffic flow? I don't know if it would back up traffic on Old Kings because of, you know, a stop sign there on the corner, but something has to be done. That is a train wreck that's coming straight at us, and you know, whether it's a stop sign or a stoplight or something,
I agree, because to the point, like the design plan that we just approved, that intersection is not going to get fixed for years, right? Even though we're working on it. So we need something in the interim to try to fix that.
And so the question I get probably 3 times a week is, Charlie, how hard is it to put in 3 stop signs? And I'm like, well, I don't know if that'll work. I see your point. But if we could look at that intersection specifically and see what our options are.
So understood, sir. We will definitely look at a short-term solution and report back to the council.
Thank you.
That's well before us. That was messed up long before us.
And that's all I have. Just thanks for the great discussion today, and it's a real pleasure to work with all you guys. Thank you.
I'm tired.
You missed one important thing, though.
Go Gators.
The Gators went 2-0 this week in
Boy.
basketball. Once again, you know.
And
But,
Jeremiah Blocker as well, just for the record.
I was going to ask him where he's from because the excessive use of y'alls made me feel like I was home.
Well, and
you know?
we went through the same Army ROTC program there at UF, so it's even better.
He's from Ocala.
Gotcha.
There you
Yeah,
go.
so he is from close to home. The other thing I have is, so I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but the state passed some laws regarding volunteers at government-owned recreation facilities, and so I wanted consensus to see if we can look at our policies and procedures to take a look and see how we kind of match up with that, whether we want to be more restrictive or match what that state law. We also have other considerations like contractors and things like that that use those facilities as well. So from a public safety standpoint, I'd like to make sure that we're protecting our residents as much as possible with people that are working out of some of our facilities.
Is that a quick answer, City Manager?
Yes, we'll get a workshop item together for you. We do have a background check for volunteers, so we will look into specifics with the new legislation and any type of vendors and contracts. We'll get that scheduled for you.
Oh, the schools have it, for sure, because my wife had it. Anything for
Yeah.
Group Class? I'm sorry.
No, I'm good.
That's it?
Yeah.
So I do have to give a report, since I'm the liaison for FC3. We had a meeting on Friday. There was a concern brought up about the grant, and I think our new director of the Historical Society sent an email to everybody about her concerns for the meeting in general, but I want to focus on the grant. So we have a grant. This year, we allotted $100,000 for that FC3 grant. A couple things. It was the intent of this council to make sure that grant is available for arts, culture, and history. The grant language does not say that, so I want to make sure we have consensus that that grant can be opened up for arts, culture, and history, and not just arts. I think the language specifically says arts and heritage. There was some concern from FC3 that maybe that was a little vague and ambiguous. So is there consensus that we clearly want that to be for arts, culture, and history?
It's written into the contract. I've
Okay,
reviewed-
it is
I-
yes, it's in the contract, yeah.
Into the contract, it says history in it.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
that was the intent at the time and we just have poor language, then let's correct that.
Okay, and then the other thing is, and I don't know who mandates this, the application period is very small. I think it's 16 days for the grant. And when I heard that it was only 16 days, I was pretty flabbergasted, to be quite frank. I don't think that's nearly enough time for people to even learn about the grant, much less apply for it. Apparently, it's a pretty relatively easy grant to apply for, but I don't know if that window is only 16 days because of something city council has to approve or staff has to approve, or why that window is so short.
I'm not sure, Ms. Pontieri. If you recall, we approved the contract back in October, and we've been working with them for a while on them assuming this process. They did not reinvent the wheel. It is the same criteria that we've used in the past, and you would think it would have been out sooner, so I'm not sure. But I have requested that our team reach out to the co-chairs, Mr. Scheer and Ms. Crouch, to set a meeting, because I've heard from a couple of you on the email from the Historical Society president and what we need to do to work better with FC3 and clean it up a little bit.
Okay. And then the other thing that I just, presumably as we get into budget in the next few months, we will have to look at this grant again and determine whether or not we will allot the same amount of money or how it will be distributed and kind of the mechanisms behind doing so. I think that there's definitely some language that we can add to make sure there's no conflicts of interest with regards to how the grant is distributed, who the grant recipients are. And then also I'd like to talk to some of our neighboring municipalities about contributing towards it, because there was discussion at FC3 about whether or not we should open this up countywide. And my initial reaction was, sure, why not? I don't see the problem with that. And then in thinking about it, well, it's all of Palm Coast money that's going for the grant. So should the grant go to, or towards events only in the city. That's the way the language reads now. If you're going to get a grant for the event, it has to happen within the city. I do think it should be countywide, but I also think we should get some buy-in from our next door neighbors. So if Bunnell and Flagler Beach want to be, or other parts of the county want to also be considered as possible grant recipients, maybe they contribute, even if it's a smaller share proportionally, because we are the lion's share of the county, that they put some skin in the game. So I don't know if it's Parks and Rec or who it would be that would go to them and see if they're interested in that, so that we can open this up countywide in the future.
Yeah, and that was on my list as part of the conversation with them on the grant, so we will make sure we cover that as well.
Okay, and then, yeah, I think, maybe just to put in the back of our heads and shelf it for now, but when we look at this grant for the future, just really making sure, I think, to alleviate some of the concerns of our new Historical Society director, to make sure that this grant is distributed in the most transparent and fair way possible.
Is that the last thing you had, Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. I want to tack on that because, I was kind of upset about it when Ms. Risa Papst, who is the new president of the Historic Society, went to that FC3 meeting. And from that email she sent me and discussions with her, I think we have an issue, and we're going to have to fix it. First off, I got a copy of their bylaws, and I think they have some conflict of interest, as we were talking about with the Humane Society, and this thing they were talking about giving people extra points if extra points if you're a member of the FC3. So you're going to tell my president and my historic society for my city that they have to be a member, pay a membership to another nonprofit organization to be eligible to get extra points towards receiving the grant that they are requesting of the money that is solely coming from my city. That's ridiculous, and we're going to fix it. But I will have Kendra send you the bylaws of the FC3.
We already got them,
We
Mr.
already
Mayor.
got them.
You got a copy of them
Yes,
from
sir.
her? And also, as far as, and I think there is some conflict of interest on the members that are not the elected officials that sit on there as liaisons, but actually within, and it should pop right out at you when you look at the bylaws. It should pop right out at you. So we have to fix this because our historic society, they have no money. They have like $50,000 right now. They have one receptionist that's on payroll that they have to pay.
They can't afford her.
The young lady's only making like $24,000. She's barely getting by. She's got a roommate and stuff. But that historic society, we have to come up and we have to be able to allow Miss Papst, that's Miss Risa Papst, the reason I got her to take that position is because she knows how to raise funds. She knows how to organize events and solicit money for that organization, but they are hanging on by a shoestring. And it seems like all these 501c3s, they come and go, they disappear, but that's our historic society. And we're a young city, but we need to preserve our city's history. And that's the reason we saved Fire Station 22. And it's our goal is to get that building up the snuff and have the historic society in there. Mm-hmm. So that is my goal, and I'm not going to let one of our primary nonprofits in our city die on the vine because we're giving money to every other municipality in the county, without them having any skin in the game.
Well, and to be fair too, Mayor, when they picked, when FC3 picked the board that was going to choose the grant recipients, it was determined that obviously none of those board members could be affiliated with any organization that applied for the grant in order to remove that inherent conflict of interest. There was also discussion as to whether or not you had to be a member of FC3 in order to apply for the grant. That is not the case. I don't know what the structure of, quote, bonus points is if you are a member. I don't know what that looks like.
So we have to fix that, but I am not going to shortchange our Historic Society. Brittany, could you please get Councilman Gabbero a copy of that letter that I sent to Ms. Petruzzi? I'm tired. I don't have anything else. Anything I have, we can talk about next week, if we're together next week. So, City Council?
I just have two quick things, because I got to go pick up Maddie and leave here at 5 o'clock. Two quick things. London Waterway ribbon cutting is scheduled for Thursday, 2/27th at 3 p.m. I hope you can all go and support that wonderful project. And then on Friday, 2/28, we are going to try and do the Florida Park Drive resurfacing from the utility project. And Mayor, that's all I had.
Yeah, we've been.
Is that that's the passive park?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we've been pushing Florida Park because of the weather.
Yes.
And I promised people we'd get on it last week.
Bang that
We didn't
gum.
do it. Anything from staff?
Public comment?
Public comment?
I think we already got that.
Everybody's tired. I can't, what's your name, sir? Me? Yes, sir. Ron Long. Ron Long. I like Ron. He's been here the whole time. He's a good
Trooper.
man.
Hung out.
Motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Let's go.
I didn't want to delay us anymore.